Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're looking at something, well, pretty huge on the global stage.
Sure.
The election of the new pope. We've pulled together news reports, background docs, even the social media announcements. Our aim to really get a sense of who this new leader is, why his election matters, and, where things might be headed. Okay, let's jump in.
Yeah, it's really quite something. So May 8th, 2025, that's yesterday as we record, Cardinal Robert Prevost becomes Pope Leo XIV. And the big headline, the one everyone's talking about, first American-born pope ever. He's from Chicago. That alone breaks a very long tradition of European popes.
Exactly, and this follows the passing of Pope Francis back on April 21st. So the cardinals went into the conclave Wednesday, May 7th in the Sistine Chapel, and then the white smoke of the signal appeared Thursday evening, 6:09 p.m. Central European time. That got confirmed super quickly, right? I saw it on X from CBS News, New York Post, almost immediately.
Mm-hmm. Very fast confirmation. And the reports say he was elected on the fourth ballot. He needed 89 votes out of the 133 cardinal electors, so getting it on the fourth ballot. That suggests, a reasonably strong consensus building.
Right. Now, thinking about who he is, his background is, it's quite layered. He has dual citizenship, U.S. and Peruvian, and spent a lot of time, really significant chunks of time, in Peru as a missionary.
Yeah, back in the mid-'80s, and then again from 88 to 98. Doing all sorts of things, parish priest, working for the diocese, teaching at the seminary administration, to really boots-on-the-ground stuff.
And his path within the church structure itself is also notable. Joined the Augustinians in 77, took his final vows in 81, academically solid too, a math degree, believe it or not, then a Master of Divinity, plus advanced degrees in canon law from Rome. He even got a doctorate studying leadership roles within his own Augustinian order.
And then he actually led that order. He was prior general of the Augustinians for, 12 years, from 2001 to 2013?
That's major leadership experience right there, before even becoming a bishop.
Exactly. He became Bishop of Chiclayo in Peru after that in 2014. But then a really key appointment came just last year, 2023. Prefect of the dicastery for bishops. I mean, that's the Vatican office that recommends bishop candidates to the Pope. Hugely influential.
Wow. Okay, so he was already shaping the future leadership of the church globally. He also headed the Pontifical Commission for Latin America and became a cardinal just last September. It feels like a pretty rapid ascent in recent years.
It does, and people who know him mention his good humor, a sense of joy even when things are tough.
Okay, so looking forward, he chose the name Leo XIV. That feels significant, doesn't it? Echoes of Leo XIII, maybe. Known for strong leadership, social teachings.
It certainly suggests that, yeah. Potential focus areas seem likely to include social justice, reaching out to the marginalized, that whole meeting people where they are idea, and maybe using his background in both the U.S. and Latin America to work on global church unity.
He's often described as a centrist, so trying to bridge divides, perhaps.
That seems to be the thinking. Balancing, progressive pastoral ideas with sticking to traditional doctrine. Like sources say he opposes women becoming deacons, but he's also seen as pushing for, broader inclusivity generally.
Mm. And there's talk, he emphasizes listening, dialogue. Does that mean continuing Pope Francis's synodal path? That big consultation process.
It could point that way, yes. But let's be clear, there are major challenges. Just being the first American pope brings a whole unique set of pressures and maybe opportunities.
Yeah.
And internally, big debates, right?
Yeah.
Same-sex blessings, the role of women. He inherits all that.
Yeah, and we also have to mention the criticisms, particularly from groups like S&P, about how past clergy abuse cases were handled.
Yeah.
Specifically mentioning a case involving Richard McGrath. That's something that definitely needs addressing. Building trust there is critical.
Absolutely crucial. And then there are the global issues any pope faces now. Climate change, poverty, inequality, big tasks.
On a more personal note, the descriptions are quite consistent. Humble, easy to talk to, good sense of humor. That consultative style people mentioned, the listening.
Yeah.
That could be key. And apparently he likes tennis. Played it when he was a missionary. As a human touch, I guess.
It does. So, yeah, it really feels like a new chapter opening up. Pope Leo XIV brings this very distinct background, this mix of experiences, into a complex situation. His likely priorities, the church politics, the controversies. It's going to be fascinating to watch unfold.
Definitely. This deep dive just gives us a snapshot based on what we know right now, the real story, the impact of his papacy that will emerge over time. So as you digest all this, think about it. What part of his background or the priorities people are talking about strikes you as most significant for what lies ahead? Something to ponder. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Ever stop and think about who really runs the coffee show in Canada?
Yeah, because it's more than just grabbing a quick cup, isn't it? It's practically a national pastime.
Totally. So we've gone through a bunch of market reports and industry analyses to figure out who the main players are.
And, what makes each one stand out in this, well, pretty crowded market?
And it is crowded because Canadians love their coffee. I saw a stat saying it's more popular than tap water.
That's right. About 71% of you drink coffee every single day.
Wow.
Averaging almost like 2.7 cups daily. That puts Canada way up there globally.
So we're talking big numbers. What's the market actually worth?
Well, for 2025, it's looking like a $6.3 billion market. And it's growing.
Growing how much?
The forecast is around 4.8% compound annual growth. So yeah, pretty robust. A lot of beans being brewed.
Okay, let's get into it. The first name that comes to mind for almost everyone has to be Tim Hortons, right?
Oh, absolutely. They're the undisputed heavyweight champion.
How dominant are we talking?
Think about this. 72% of the hot brewed coffee market. 72%.
That's staggering.
And almost 60% of the fast food breakfast market, too, based on 2021 data. Plus, they even have a big chunk, like 23% of the coffee you buy to brew at home.
And their presence is just everywhere. How many stores are there now?
Last count, June 2023, it was 3,520 stores across Canada.
And the sales figures must be huge.
Yep, $9.5 billion in gross sales in Canada for 2023. Just massive.
So what's their secret sauce? How do they keep that lead?
Well, it seems like a combination of things. They're always tweaking the menu, adding lunch and dinner items.
Right, not just coffee and donuts anymore.
Exactly. And they focus on quality improvements, people notice, like using fresh cracked eggs. Remember the Tim Biebs thing?
Oh yeah, those collaborations work.
They do, but fundamentally it's about being affordable, being everywhere, and building that, really strong brand loyalty. Canadians just feel connected to Tim's.
Makes sense. That accessibility is huge. Okay, so who's number two? Clearly Starbucks.
They've got a solid foothold. Around 1,603 stores in Canada as of early 2024.
So their market share for brewed coffee isn't near Tim's, but still significant.
Yeah, the estimates put them maybe in the 10 to 15% range for hot brewed coffee, but globally they're enormous.
What are their global revenues like?
Over $36 billion in 2024. North America is a huge part of that, obviously.
And they seem really focused on the digital side, loyalty programs.
Absolutely. Digital sales are massive for them, over $14 billion globally last year. The Starbucks Rewards program is key. They really push that premium experience customization.
Right, catering to maybe a different crowd than Tim's.
And they adapt, like getting rid of extra charges for non-dairy milk.
Yep.
They watch those consumer trends closely.
Interesting. Okay, let's shift gears a bit. Van Hout. You don't see as many storefronts, but they're a big name, especially in certain areas.
Exactly. Their main game is office coffee services. That's where they really shine.
How big is that?
They serve over 1 million cups a day. 1 million. To over 40,000 businesses.
Wow. Okay, so less retail focus, more B2B.
Pretty much. Mostly in Quebec and Ontario for their cafes. They've got that long heritage since 1919, now part of Keurig Dr. Pepper.
So their strategy is quality service for businesses. Reliable machines, maintenance, fair trade auctions.
Precisely. That's their niche. Reliability and quality coffee for the workplace. Though you do see them in retail sometimes, like partnerships with Canadian Tire.
So we have Tim's for mass appeal, Starbucks for premium, Van Hout for offices. What about others? Are there other significant chains?
Oh, definitely. The market's diverse. You've got Second Cup, focusing more on that specialty coffee vibe, maybe around 193 stores.
Okay.
Then there's Robin's Donuts, stronger out east, with about 140 locations. And Country Style, often in smaller towns or rural spots, maybe 350 stores. So, yeah, lots of players.
And underpinning all this is just Canadians really, really like coffee.
Can't say it enough. That 71% daily figure is huge. And demographically, older adults, say 55, 64, are a big chunk of coffee drinkers.
But the trend is towards better coffee.
Let's see, right?
Specialty brews.
Absolutely. Everyone's trying to tap into that. Tim's upgrades, Starbucks whole model, even Van Hout offering premium office options. The demand for quality and variety is growing.
But it can't all be smooth sailing. What about challenges? Competition must be fierce.
Intense, especially with Tim Hortons being so dominant. And costs are a factor. Remember coffee bean prices spiking?
Yeah, Arabica went way up.
Over 80% since late 2020. That definitely puts pressure on margins and the pandemic recovery, of course.
How did that change things?
Well, the sector actually shrank a bit in 2020, but it's bouncing back. Things like digital ordering, drive-thrus became even more critical. Everyone had to adapt fast.
So looking forward, what's the outlook?
Still growing.
Oh, yeah. Projections are really strong. Some see the market hitting over $34 billion by 2034.
Wow.
So continued growth driven by innovation, maybe some expansion, and definitely sustainability. Things like fair trade, eco-friendly packaging. Consumers care more and more about that. Okay, so to wrap up, Tim Hortons holds the crown with massive reach. Starbucks owns that premium customized space. Van Hout is the king of the office coffee pot. And it's all happening in this really dynamic, growing Canadian market.
It is, and it leaves you with a thought, doesn't it? Coffee is so deeply rooted in our daily lives here in Canada. So as our tastes keep shifting, towards maybe more specialized, ethically sourced, sustainable coffees, how are these big players going to keep evolving to stay part of that ritual for you? How will they adapt next? Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're diving into something delicious, that whole debate.
Pain au chocolat versus chocolatine.
Exactly. And it turns out the story behind chocolatine, well, it's fascinating. Your curiosity about food history really sparked this one.
It's a great example.
So we've looked at, linguistic stuff, historical records, even some popular stories you shared.
Yeah, the anecdotes are interesting too.
Our mission today, get to the bottom of chocolatine. We're going to try and debunk a pretty common myth, maybe give you one of those aha moments. Sound good?
Absolutely. Let's unpack it. It's amazing how much history gets wrapped up in just a name, isn't it?
Totally. Okay, so first up, that story, the one you hear a lot, about English speakers, way back in the 15th century in Aquitaine.
Right, asking for chocolate and bread.
Yeah, and supposedly that morphed into chocolatine. It's kind of charming, right? You can picture it.
It is a nice story, and some sources, like Tasting Table and Bread Story, they mention it. But often as like a tale.
A tale, exactly, not necessarily fact.
Because, well, linguistically, it's a bit thin. You kind of expect more evidence of that shift from chocolate and bread to chocolatine.
Right, and here's the kicker. Historically...
Or timeline.
Yeah, the timeline. Chocolate wasn't really common in Europe until, the 16th century? After cacao arrived?
Precisely. So a 15th century English origin, it just doesn't add up.
Yeah.
Highly unlikely.
Okay, so if it's not chocolate and bread, what's the more accepted idea?
Well, the much stronger theory is simpler, and it's actually French.
Right. Forget the English tourists.
Yeah, it likely comes straight from chocolat, French for chocolate, combined with the suffix in.
Okay, in. What does that usually mean in French?
It's pretty common, especially with food words. It often makes something a diminutive, like a little version. Think nougatine, like a small nougat thing, or amandine for almonds, even gelatine.
Gotcha. So chocolatine would just mean little chocolate.
Exactly, which fits perfectly for a pastry with, well, a little chocolate inside.
Makes sense. And places like Wiktionary, French Wikipedia, they support this.
They do. And French Wikipedia as a neat layer. Apparently chocolatine was used earlier, maybe mid-19th century.
Oh, for what?
For other chocolate things like bonbons, maybe drinks, cakes. It wasn't tied just to the pastry until later, probably the 20th century.
Huh. Interesting. But it's not like everyone in France calls it that, right? There's that divide.
Oh, definitely. It's very regional. You've got pain au chocolat, mainly up north and in the southeast.
Oy.
But head down to the southwest, Tochemé, Nouvelle-Aquitaine, Occitanie, around Toulouse, maybe.
That's chocolatine territory.
It's chocolatine land, yeah.
Yeah?
It's tied into local identity.
And didn't the local Gascon language borrow it too?
It did, as chocolatina, which again points strongly to that southwest French origin.
And people feel strongly about it.
Oh, absolutely. It's cultural pride.
Right.
Even got discussed in the French Parliament, believe it or not, about recognizing the name.
Wow, that's serious pastry passion. Now, wasn't there one other slightly different theory? Something about Austria.
Ah, right. That's a less common one, but worth mentioning. The historian Jean Lapoujade suggested it.
Okay, what was his idea?
He wondered if it could be a sort of mishearing of German, like chocolatine croissant.
Chocolatine. Okay. How does that connect?
Well, the idea links back to August Zang, the Austrian baker who brought Viennese pastries to Paris in the 19th century.
Right, him.
Maybe the German sound in chocolatine got softened, misheard.
Yeah.
Somehow ended up sounding like chocolatine to French ears.
Plausible, maybe?
But less likely than the French "in" explanation.
Generally considered less likely, yeah. The linguistic evidence for chocolat plus inscape, meaning little chocolate, is just, well, it's stronger. It fits the pattern.
So ultimately, that whole chocolate and bread story,
It really falls apart. No linguistic backup. The history's wrong.
yeah, the evidence just isn't there.
Nope.
Okay, so let's sum this up. The takeaway seems pretty clear. Chocolatine almost certainly means little chocolate.
Right. And it's a regional French thing, born out of the language itself in the Southwest, not some mangled English phrase.
Exactly. Mystery likely solved. And it just shows, doesn't it? These regional food names, they have real stories packed inside them about culture, about history.
It really makes you think, how many other food names that we just take for granted have these, hidden histories. Definitely something to chew on next time you're at the bakery.
For sure.
All right, that's it for this deep dive. Thanks for exploring this with us.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're jumping into the online world of someone called Careful.
Or caramel truffle, yeah. Fascinating case.
Definitely. Someone who somehow balances, a healthcare IT job with creating this really humorous visual novel.
And it's all based in the My Little Pony fandom.
Exactly. And what we've got is basically a profile built from their public digital footprint.
Yeah, like their game page, X, Tumblr, fan comments, all that stuff.
So our mission really is to piece together who Careful is online, what drives their creativity, just from these, digital breadcrumbs.
Okay, so starting with identity, what do we know? Seems like they might be French originally.
Yes, signs point to France, but now living in Canada, maybe Quebec.
The use of tabernacle kind of suggests that, doesn't it? It's a very Quebecois thing.
It really is. And then that healthcare IT job tells you they've got some technical chops.
For sure. And then there's the fursona, the lion-unicorn hybrid.
Right, which points pretty clearly to the furry community.
A space often about creative expression, building these kinds of characters.
Which probably feeds into their main creative work.
My Little Pony. Super ethical shipping climax. You gotta love the title.
It's brilliant, a visual novel, and it's basically a parody, right? Taking gentle aim at fandom shipping.
Where fans really want certain characters to get together.
Exactly. It came out fully in 2019, but the demo was way back in 2014.
And specifically set before Season 3 of Friendship is magic. So they know their source material.
Oh, definitely. And it has, get this, 87 endings.
87? That's wow. That's a lot of branching paths. Just real effort.
Totally. It's mature-ish, but safe for work.
Yeah.
And the humor, they have gag language options like English and that tabarnak again.
Shows a bit of cultural awareness, maybe self-deprecation too. And the art style is interesting.
Yeah, like detailed backgrounds, but with these chibi characters. Creates a funny contrast.
Kind of art style dissonance for comedic effect. They even include a parody content warning, self-aware.
Okay, so that's the game. What about their actual online presence, how they interact?
Well, it seems pretty structured. They have 2 X accounts.
2. Why?
Seems like one's for general stuff, My Little Pony, creative things. The other is kept separate for politics or maybe NSFW content.
Huh. Interesting. So deliberate management of their image, maybe?
Looks that way. Then there's Tumblr, which seems a bit more personal.
What kind of stuff is there?
Updates about the IT job, living alone, some technical hobbies like image processing, sort of day-to-day glimpses.
And how do they react to people playing their game?
Oh, they seem genuinely grateful, even surprised by the positive feedback. Reviews, let's plays, even speedruns.
That's nice to see. Shows some humility.
Absolutely. And they engage, too. Share sketches, respond to people. Seems friendly, community-oriented.
So pulling it all together, what psychological threads can we, tentatively pull?
Well, the humor is obvious. Clearly enjoys making people laugh, playing with meta-commentary.
And the community engagement values that connection, right?
Definitely seems to value shared experience and that structured identity, the 2 X accounts.
Yeah, what about that? Shows they think strategically about how they present themselves online.
It suggests self-awareness, at least. Managing different facets of their online life. Plus, the furry interest points to identity exploration, creative expression.
And the tech skills from the day job clearly feed into the game development side. It's a neat mix.
Versatile, yeah. Technical and creative.
And it sounds like fans really get it. The feedback mentions cute, wholesome, meta.
Yeah, it's hitting the mark within that specific fandom, which is probably exactly what they were aiming for.
So wrapping up, Careful, or Caramel Truffle, seems like this really multifaceted creator. Tech skills, sense of humor, connects with the community.
And manages their online self pretty carefully. It paints a picture of someone quite thoughtful.
It really does. Which leads us to our final thought for you listening.
What does this kind of careful curation of an online identity, like careful separation of accounts, tell us about navigating our own online versus offline selves today?
Something to think about.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're jumping straight into the Red Hat ecosystem.
Right. Fedora, RHEL, CentOS Stream, lots to unpack there.
Exactly. We've looked over the notes and sources you sent, aiming to get a clear handle on, what's what.
And when you might use each one.
Yeah, the mission is simple. Cut through the jargon, figure out the right fit for different needs. Let's start with Fedora.
Okay. Fedora. Think of it as the proving ground. It's upstream for RHEL.
So new stuff lands there first.
Pretty much. And it comes in different flavors or editions. You've got Workstation, that's your typical desktop, usually GNOME, Wayland, BTRFs. Really modern software.
Use case being, if you want the absolute latest.
Bingo. Then there's Server for testing server stuff, but maybe not for your main production boxes yet.
Okay. And IoT for small devices.
Yeah, lightweight and embedded systems. And there's CoreOS, too.
Right, that's the container one. Minimal auto updates.
Exactly. For Podman, Kubernetes deployments, and don't forget Silverblue.
The immutable desktop thing.
Yeah.
That sounds interesting. Atomic updates, rollbacks.
Yeah, very focused on desktop stability and security in a different way. Plus, you have the spins.
Oh, yeah, for different desktops like KDE.
Right. The key thing with Fedora, fast releases. Every 6 months.
Wow, okay. And support is about 13 months.
Roughly. So you're always getting cutting-edge software, but you got to keep updating. It's very community-driven.
Okay, fast and fresh. Now let's switch gears to RHEL, Red Hat Enterprise Linux.
Right. This is the commercial side. Stability, enterprise support, that's the name of the game.
Main versions are Server and Workstation.
Primarily, RHEL Server is for your critical production systems. Think multiple architectures, Linux security, serious stuff.
And Workstation, more for developers in a company.
Yeah, stable, high-performance desktops, still enterprise-focused, usually GNOME, but built for reliability and development workflows.
Gotcha. And the big draw here is the stability and support, right?
Absolutely. Major releases are maybe every 2-3 years, minor ones every 6 months or so. And you get 10 years of support.
10 years. That's a long time compared to Fedora.
It is. The software is thoroughly tested, maybe not bleeding edge, but dependable. And the support, it's commercial, part of the subscription.
So you pay for that peace of mind and help.
Exactly. And there are specialized versions too, like for SAP or edge computing. So Fedora innovates, RHEL stabilizes.
Makes sense. Okay, so where does CentOS Stream fit into all this? It replaced the old CentOS, didn't it?
It did. Think of it now as the midstream. It sits between Fedora and RHEL.
So it gets stuff after Fedora, but before RHEL.
Precisely. It's continuously delivered, kind of a rolling preview of what's coming in future RHEL minor releases. It's where development and testing for RHEL happens more publicly.
So right now there's Stream 9, aligned with RHEL 9.
Yep, supported till 2027, and Stream 10 is on the way for RHEL 10. Unlike Fedora or RHEL, it doesn't really have distinct editions.
You just set it up as needed.
Okay.
Server or desktop.
Yeah. Support is community-based, like Fedora, but the timeline is tied to the RHEL lifecycle it mirrors. Software is newer than RHEL, more stable than Fedora.
Okay, so it's this. Middle ground. Free, like Fedora, but closer to RHEL compatibility.
That's the idea. Great for testing things for RHEL.
So quick recap. Fedora newest, short support, free, community. RHEL stable, long support, paid, commercial help. CentOS, stream free, middle ground software, community support tied to RHEL.
That sums it up pretty well.
Okay, let's think use cases. Desktop. Fedora for latest, RHEL for stable enterprise. CentOS Stream maybe less polished for desktop.
Generally, yeah. Servers. RHEL for production, definitely. Fedora for trying new server tech, CentOS Stream, maybe non-critical servers, or dev test environments that need to mimic RHEL closely.
Right, and for developers.
Fedora gives you the newest tools. CentOS Stream is perfect if you're targeting RHEL and want to test against upcoming changes. RHEL itself if you need that absolute production environment parity.
And those specialized ones, Fedora IoT, CoreOS, Silverblue, and the RHEL ffmpeg for specific jobs. So, choosing. Fedora if you crave the latest or need those specific container to mutable features. RHEL for rock-solid stability and paid support in business.
And CentOS if you want a free way to develop and test for RHEL, staying close to its future state.
That lack of commercial support for Fedora and CentOS, that's a big consideration for businesses, isn't it?
It's definitely a key difference compared to RHEL. You rely on the community.
Okay, so Fedora pushes boundaries, RHEL provides the stable base, and CentOS bridges that gap, showing the way forward.
Nicely put. Fedora for innovation, RHEL for stability, CentOS for that.
Yeah.
Preview and development track.
All right. So wrapping up, Fedora innovation, RHEL stability, CentOS the middle path in the Red Hat family.
And that brings us to a final thought for you listening. How much change can you handle? Consider those release cycles, the support links. What does your own need for the newest features versus your need for absolute long-term reliability tell you? Where do you fall on that spectrum? That might point you towards which of these you should explore further.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're looking at two seemingly quite different worlds, really.
Yeah, it definitely looks that way on the surface.
We've got Frédéric Molas, the French YouTuber, known as Le Joueur du Grenier.
The Attic Gamer.
And then, completely different track, the election just yesterday of Pope Leo XIV.
The first American-born pope. Quite something.
Exactly. So our goal here is to kind of unpack what makes each of these figures and, their areas significant.
It's interesting, isn't it, how you have online entertainment on one hand and this huge global religious institution on the other. Both in their own ways tell us something about influence today.
Okay, let's start with Frédéric Molas then. Born in France in 1982, he kicked off the Joueur du Grenier web series with Sébastien Rassiat. When was it, 2009?
2009, yeah. And the whole premise is like humorous reviews of old video games, sometimes pretty cutting,
Right, very pointed humor. And it was inspired, interestingly, by an American show, the Angry Video Game Nerd.
AVGNN, which shows that sort of cross-pollination online, doesn't it?
It really does. How formats travel and get adapted.
Molas definitely found that same nerve, that mix of nostalgia and comedic frustration, but, very French.
Yeah, tailored it perfectly. And it obviously worked. Huge following.
Speaks volumes about shared experiences like retro gaming, building communities online.
Totally. And he didn't stop there, right? He's got other projects, Papy Grenier, Bazaar de Grenier.
Diversified his content.
And he's involved in charity work like the Z event. That's a big deal in France.
Huge. Raises massive amounts for charity. Shows real influence beyond just games.
He's married to an illustrator, Serena Molas.
Yeah.
Seems very connected in creative scenes. And you can tell his passion's genuine. Like his love for old Mega Drive games really comes through.
Absolutely. That authenticity is probably key to why his channels have, millions of subs?
Millions, yeah. And he co-owns a bar, Arcadia. Sort of bringing that retro vibe offline, too.
Nice. It's clear that blend of humor and nostalgia just clicks, especially with younger audiences, teenagers.
And he's into other geek culture stuff too, right? Anime like Chevaliers du Zodiac.
Saint Seiya, yeah. And films like Jurassic Park, it paints a picture of his influences.
So he's a great example of how these online personalities can really shape, cultural pastes around niche interests.
Definitely. That power of a consistent voice, focusing on shared memories, it builds a really strong connection.
Okay, so now let's shift gears completely.
Right, over to the Vatican.
Yesterday, May 8th, 2025, Cardinal Robert Prevost is elected Pope Leo XIV.
And the big headline, first American ever to hold the papacy.
Yeah, born in Chicago, 1955. But, and this is interesting, he holds dual U.S. and Peruvian citizenship.
That's significant. Reflects all that time he spent as a missionary in Peru.
A huge amount of time. It suggests maybe a papacy that's really attuned to Latin America.
Could be. Bridging North and South America, perhaps, given where so many Catholics live.
Makes sense. His background might point towards focusing on things like social justice, maybe church unity.
That seems plausible. Though we should also mention there has been some past controversy regarding his handling of clergy sexual abuse allegations.
Yes, that's part of the record, too. Important context. Looking at his path, he joined the Augustinian order back in 77.
And has quite the academic background, too. Degrees in mathematics and canon law.
A bit unusual, the math part, maybe.
A little, yeah. Shows us a certain kind of analytical mind, perhaps.
He spent a long time in Peru, from 85 to 98, as a pastor, diocesan official.
Then led the entire Augustinian order globally for over a decade.
Right. then bishop in Chiclayo, Peru.
And just last year, 2023, appointed prefect of the dicastery for bishops. That's a really key Vatican role.
Overseeing bishop appointments worldwide, yeah.
Yeah.
So he was already quite central.
His election wasn't immediate, though. Fourth ballot, is that right?
Fourth ballot, yeah. And the name Leo XIV connects him to past popes, often seen as, well, strong leaders.
Interesting choice. Signaling something, maybe? He's generally viewed as a centrist figure, though.
Trying to balance tradition with modern needs, perhaps. That's the expectation for many.
Which is always the challenge, isn't it? Navigating those different currents within a global church. How does a centrist bridge those divides?
So thinking about both these figures, Mullahs and Pope Leo XIV, it really highlights different kinds of influence, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Mola shows how, humor and shared nostalgia in a niche online space can build a massive, dedicated community.
Yeah, the power of that personal connection, almost.
And with Pope Leo XIV, you're looking at the immense significance of the first American pope, but also how his specific background, especially in Latin America, might steer the Catholic Church on global issues.
Right. How might his experiences shape engagement with different parts of the world?
And that reported leadership style, consultative, they say, that could change how decisions get made internally, too.
Definitely gives you a lot to think about. The changing ways influence works, online and in these huge established institutions. Well, thanks for diving into this with us.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. We take a stack of information, pull out the interesting threads, and, well, try to make sense of it for you.
And today, we've got quite the mix. We're looking at papal elections, the brand new Pope Leo XIV, this pastry called chocolatine.
Then jumping over to Canadian coffee habits, Ubuntu Linux flavors, Wayland display servers.
And finishing up with something called Gemini Deep Dive Podcasts. Sounds random, I know.
It does, but stick with us. We think there are some surprising connections to uncover here. Let's start with those papal elections.
Right. So the speed is what's interesting lately. If you look at the last 10 conclaves, the time it takes to elect a pope, well, ranges from 1 to 4 days.
Okay, 1 to 4 days. Is there a trend? Are they getting faster?
It seems that way, yeah. The average is about 2.2 days. The median is 2 days. But the most common outcome, the mode, is just 1 day.
1 day, so like really quick decisions sometimes.
Exactly. Francis, Benedict XVI, John Paul I, even Pius XII back a bit further, all elected in a day. But then you have Pius X and Pius XI, they took 4 days. So there's definitely variation.
Any idea why they might be speeding up now? Better communication, maybe?
That could be part of it. Or perhaps procedural changes like the rules Pope John Paul II put in place in 1996. Maybe things are just, clearer for the cardinals now.
Interesting. And speaking of popes, we have a new one just announced.
Yes, big news. Cardinal Robert Prevost, elected May 8th, 2025. He's now Pope Leo XIV.
And the headline grabber, he's the first American-born pope.
That's right. Born in Chicago, he actually holds dual U.S. and Peruvian citizenship and spent a lot of his career doing missionary work in Peru.
An American pope with deep roots in South America. What might that signal for his priorities, do you think?
Well, based on that background, you might expect to focus on things like social justice, perhaps global church unity, and, like any modern pope, balancing tradition with contemporary needs.
And we should probably briefly mention there has been some controversy surrounding how he handled certain abuse allegations in the past.
Yes, that's part of the record, and something that will likely be discussed further. It's certainly historically significant, though, having a non-European, specifically an American, in that role. Breaks a long tradition.
Okay, let's pivot completely. What's the deal with this word chocolatine? Any connection to popes, past or present?
Probably not directly. Chocolatine is what some people in France call a pain au chocolat, the chocolate-filled pastry. The name likely comes from chocolat, plus the suffix in, meaning like little chocolate.
So not chocolate and bread from some old English phrase.
That theory seems pretty unlikely. The timing doesn't really work with when chocolate actually got to Europe or with language evolution. It's more of a 19th century invention, the pastry itself.
Meaning earlier popes, even the ones based in France centuries ago, wouldn't have encountered it.
Exactly. And there's no record of recent popes having any particular interest in them during visits to France either. So a fun thought, but likely no connection.
All right, from French pastries to Canadian coffee, a huge market up there, right?
Massive, about $6.3 billion in 2025. And get this, for 71% of Canadians, coffee is more popular than tap water.
Wow. Who are the big players? I assume Tim Hortons is prominent.
Oh yeah, Tim Hortons is the leader by far.
Mm.
They have something like 72% of the hot brewed coffee market share, with over 3,500 stores.
72%.
Huge. Starbucks is second, quite a bit behind in store count, around 1,600 stores. And Van Hout's are pretty strong, especially in the office coffee space.
Is it just about accessibility, or is the type of coffee changing too?
The trend towards specialty coffee is definitely growing in Canada, just like elsewhere. But Tim Hortons' dominance is, well, it's pretty entrenched.
Okay, quick tech detour. Ubuntu Linux. It has different flavors. What does that mean?
Yeah, think of them as official variations of Ubuntu. They use the same core system but offer different desktop environments, the look and feel, the default apps. So like, Ubuntu is designed to be lightweight for older computers.
Another.
Ubuntu Studio is tailored for multimedia creators, video editing, audio work. Ubuntu Kylin is specifically for Mandarin Chinese users. Different looks, different tools for different needs.
Got it. And where does Wayland fit in? Is that another flavor?
No, Wayland isn't a flavor. It's the underlying technology that draws everything on your screen. It's a display server protocol, newer than the old X11 system.
And is Ubuntu using it now?
The main Ubuntu version with the Gnome desktop, yes. It uses Wayland by default in the latest releases like 25.04. Kubuntu, which uses the KDE Plasma desktop, also defaults to Wayland now. Probably Ubuntu too.
But not all the flavors.
Right. Some others, like Ubuntu or Lubuntu, they still tend to default to the older X11 system, though Wayland might be an option. It's a gradual transition across the Linux world.
Okay, last stop. Gemini Deep Dive podcasts. Sounds meta. What are they?
They're basically AI-generated audio discussions. Google's Gemini AI creates them. It seems to use their audio overview feature.
So you feed it text.
Exactly. You upload your material, research papers, reports, articles, whatever, and the AI generates a conversation, kind of like this one, between two virtual hosts discussing that content.
Wow. AI making its own podcast. Do they sound robotic?
Apparently, they sound surprisingly human, thanks to advanced natural language processing and text-to-speech tech. But yeah, entirely generated by AI based on the input text.
So we went from papal conclave speeds and the first American pope through French pastries and Canadian coffee dominance to Ubuntu flavors and AI-generated audio.
It's quite a journey. But you start to see threads, right? The impact of procedures and maybe consensus on ancient traditions like conclaves.
The historical significance of breaking geographical molds in leadership.
How technology like AI is changing how we even consume and process information, turning dense text into a listenable chat.
It really makes you think about how interconnected things are becoming. An American pope with Peruvian ties leading a historically European institution, AI summarizing complex topics. What other unexpected connections are hiding just beneath the surface? Something to ponder.
Okay, so let's dive in. The date was May 8th, 2025. And globally, really, all eyes were on Rome, weren't they?
Absolutely. St. Peter's Square, the Sistine Chapel chimney, everyone waiting for that puff of white smoke.
The signal for the new pope, Leon XIV. But what actually happened... Well, it wasn't quite the textbook announcement.
Not even close. Memorable is putting it mildly. It was historically bizarre, almost like a divine prank.
Right. So paint the picture for us again. Packed square, sunny day, people are expectant, maybe a bit tense.
Exactly. Faithful, journalists, everyone looking up. Then finally, white smoke. But the source. That's where things went off script.
Yeah, it wasn't the chimney stack, was it? Well, you describe it.
It was this enormous seagull. I mean, truly gigantic. Almost a caricature, perched right where you'd expect the smoke, normally.
A caricature. And it wasn't just sitting there, the smoke itself. Our sources call it a sacred fart.
Huh. Well, yes. It apparently expelled this long, cloudy plume of white smoke. A canonical flatulence, as one report rather vividly put it.
It just takes this incredibly solemn moment, this ancient signal, and turns it into, well, that.
It injects this instant, powerful dose of the absurd, doesn't it? Forces you to see this sacred tradition through a completely unexpected, almost comical lens.
But wait, it gets weirder. Because the seagull delivering the smoke signal wasn't even the main event, was it?
Oh no, that was just the prelude. Because emerging from that very cloud of avian smoke
came the man himself, Pope Leon XIV.
Descending, propelled downwards like some kind of celestial package delivered by Seagull Express.
And his posture, arms open, like he's embracing the heavens, or maybe just realizing he's being dropped.
That ambiguity is key, I think. Divine arrival or just airborne confusion. And he's fully kitted out, right?
Oh, yeah. The works. Fresh papal garments, bright white cassock. The mitre looked impeccable, even the gold cross swinging wildly as he came down.
But his face... The descriptions mention this mix of, like, solemn fear and pontifical surprise.
So ecstasy of being chosen, maybe? Mixed with sheer panic about being ejected from a giant bird's rear end?
Precisely that contrast. Mystical and mundane terror all at once.
You can only imagine the crowd below. Just silence, utter disbelief.
Speechless seems to be the consensus. Not awe, necessarily, but stunned by the sheer surreal absurdity of it all. This wasn't in the script.
And the journalists? I bet they had a field day.
Oh, absolutely. Cameras flashing, capturing everything. That smoke trail spreading behind the bird like some kind of parody incense. It was this perfect storm, wasn't it?
Ancient ritual, 247 news cycle, and just bizarre, almost slapstick humor.
Yeah, like the Holy Spirit decided to, improvise with a seagull, a possibly constipated seagull.
So just to recap the core strangeness, Pope Leon IV, if elected. Signal. White smoke from a giant seagull, followed by the Pope descending from said smoke cloud.
Exactly, which really leaves you, the listener, with something to chew on, doesn't it? Think about it. This collision of profound tradition and utter absurdity. What does an event like that tell us about our expectations? About history? About how we react when the sacred gets weird?
It definitely challenges how you think about these big historical religious moments.
It certainly does. Something to ponder. Okay, welcome to this deep dive.
Good to be here.
So today, we're really digging into the timeline of papal elections, the conclaves.
Yeah, specifically how long they've actually taken. We looked at some historical records.
Right, mainly that big list on Wikipedia of papal conclaves, and there was an NBC News piece on durations, too.
And our goal, really, is just to see if there are any, interesting trends. How long does it typically take to elect a new pope? Has it changed much?
That's the mission. Extract those key insights.
Exactly. We're focusing on the last 10 to see what pops out.
Okay, so conclaves. They've been around a while, but they weren't always so structured, right?
Well, yeah, the really formalized rules kicked in around 1274. The idea was partly to make sure elections didn't drag on forever.
Makes sense. So for this analysis, you looked at the last 10 popes.
That's right. From Pope Francis going back chronologically to Pius X.
And how did you figure out the duration? Just start date to end date?
Pretty much. We just calculated the number of days each conclave was officially in session, based on the recorded start and end dates.
Okay, so lay it on us. What's the big picture, the range?
Well, looking at just these last 10, the shortest was 1 day and the longest was 4 days.
1 to 4 days. That's actually maybe shorter than some people might think.
It can feel that way, yeah.
So what's typical then? Is there an average?
There is. If you average out those 10 conclaves, it comes to about 2.2 days.
2.2 days, okay.
But what's maybe more telling is how often they finish really quickly.
Oh yeah, like super fast.
Well, the most frequent duration, the mode, was just a single day.
1 day. Wow. Which popes were elected that quickly?
4 of the 10. Francis, Benedict XVI before him, John Paul I, and also Pius XII way back, all elected on day 1.
That's pretty rapid for such a significant choice.
It is.
What about the median, like the absolute middle value if you line them all up?
The median duration is 2 days, right in the middle.
And who fell into that 2-day category?
That was John Paul II and Paul VI. Both took exactly 2 days.
Okay, so a lot are done in 1 or 2 days, but you said the range went up to 4.
Right, we did see some longer ones.
Who took longer?
Well, John XXIII and Benedict XVI. Their conclaves lasted 3 days each.
3 days, okay.
And then going back a bit further, Pius XI and Pius X, their elections both stretched to 4 days.
Okay, so there's definitely some variation there. But listening to those names, it feels like the more recent ones cluster at the short end. Am I picking up on a real trend?
I think you are. The data really seems to suggest a move towards shorter conclaves.
How so?
Well, like you said, those longer ones, 3 and 4 days, those were all in the earlier part of the period we looked at, mostly early to mid-20th century.
Right.
Since the late 20th century, it's predominantly 1 or 2 days. And think about the last 2 we mentioned, Benedict VI and Francis.
Both 1 day?
Exactly. Both wrapped up on day 1. So, yeah, it looks like a trend.
That's quite a shift. Any ideas why? What could be causing these quicker decisions?
It's hard to say for sure, but there are possibilities. Maybe better communication among the cardinals beforehand. Perhaps they arrive with a clearer consensus, or at least fewer major blocking factions.
That could make sense. Anything else? Rules changes?
That's another factor people point to. The rules have been updated. For instance, the 1996 Apostolic Constitution, Universi Dominici Gregis. It refined some voting procedures. Maybe that streamlined things a bit.
Interesting. So potentially a combination of factors.
Probably, yeah.
But it's not like clockwork, right? There's still some unpredictability.
Oh, absolutely. We calculated the standard deviation, just as a measure of spread, and it's about 1.17 days.
Which means?
It means that while the average is low and the trend is towards shorter, there's still, a bit of wiggle room.
Right.
A 2-day conclave is common. A 3-day isn't unheard of. It's not guaranteed to be 1 day.
Okay, got it. So bringing this all together, what does this analysis tell us if we're thinking about, say, the next time a conclave happens?
Well, connecting the dots, the historical trend definitely suggests recent papal elections tend to be swift, often just a day or two.
So if history is any guide, we might expect a relatively quick process next time around.
Based purely on the last few decades, yeah, that wouldn't be a surprising outcome. A 1 or 2 day conclave seems to be the modern norm, if you can call it that.
So the main takeaway here seems clear. Electing a pope recently is generally faster than it used to be, say, 70 or 100 years ago. Often just takes that day or two.
That sums it up pretty well.
All right, so as we wrap this up, maybe a final thought for people to chew on.
Sure. Given this trend towards faster conclaves and thinking about those possible reasons, communication, rules, consensus, it makes you wonder, doesn't it? If a future conclave were suddenly very short, like less than a day or surprisingly long, maybe 4 or 5 days again,
Yeah.
what might that signal? What could an unusually timed conclave going against the recent trend tell you about the state of the church, the dynamics among the cardinals, or the direction things are heading at that particular moment?
That's definitely something interesting to consider. Food for thought.
Just something to think about.
Ever stop to think what a pope's favorite food might tell us about them?
It sounds a bit unusual, maybe.
Right. But our deep dive today actually uncovered something pretty interesting. There seems to be a really strong link between their go-to dishes and, well, where they came from, their nationalities specifically.
It's fascinating, isn't it, how food connects us to our roots. We've been digging into a few source articles from places like Bon Appetit, inside the Vatican, Geographicpedia, to see how deep this culinary connection really goes.
Yeah, and it's really about exploring how personal identity, regional identity can shape even these, major world figures.
So the core idea we kept seeing is that popes' favorite foods often mirror the cuisine of their home countries. It's quite consistent.
Well, let's get into some examples then. It makes it clearer.
Okay, we'll start with St. Peter. He's associated with Peter's fish, simple meals.
Makes sense. He was a fisherman from Galilee.
Exactly. The sources point right back to his background. Then you have John Netrin III.
The peasant pope.
Right. Loved polenta, that hearty Italian cornmeal dish, and local cheeses. Very much tied to his rural Italian upbringing.
And John Paul II, I remember reading about his favorite.
Oh, yeah. Kremoka, that famous Polish cream cake. And Polish meats, too. It's a direct line to his Polish heritage. Some sources even mention Polish nuns making these for him.
Wow. Okay. And Benedict VI, he was German, right? Bavarian.
Yep. And his tastes? Bavarian, potato ravioli, Christmas cookies, even beer. Very Bavarian. He apparently had quite a sweet tooth, too.
It's so specific. Then there's the current pope, Francis.
Argentinian through and through. Empanadas, dulce de leche made.
Pizza, too, I think.
Pizza fits, yeah.
Yeah.
Simple, hearty, comforting foods. Things he would have grown up with in Argentina.
Even if we go back a bit further, Pius II.
Piccolomini, yeah. He loved cacio cheese from Pienza, his hometown in Italy. Another link to local Italian food.
And Gregory VI, enjoying local Italian dishes, even catching his own fish, apparently.
It shows a real appreciation for regional food, doesn't it?
Definitely. But, are there other things going on? What about the time period they lived in?
Well, that's something the sources touch on. You see some earlier popes like Martin IV with his eels cooked in Vernaccia wine, or Clem VI, known for really lavish feasts.
So fancier tastes back then compared to simpler diets more recently?
Sometimes, yeah, but it's not a strict rule. Often those fancier tastes were still tied to regional specialties or, what was available and considered high status then. And even the simpler diets of modern popes still strongly reflect their national cuisines.
Okay. What about other factors like health or even church policies?
There are mentions, but they seem more like isolated incidents. Martin V apparently had indigestion problems. Paul II, it might have been poisoned by melons.
Yikes.
Right? And maybe you could speculate a link, like Paul VI having a simpler diet after reforming fasting rules,
Yeah.
or Pius V's very basic food reflecting his ascetic life.
But the connection isn't as consistent as the cultural one.
Exactly. That's the thread that runs through everything. The sources really emphasize how these food choices give you a glimpse into their personalities, their backgrounds, their national origins are just front and center in their food preferences.
Yeah, the lists provided really line that up. St. Peter's fish, John Tennythirt's polenta, France's empanadas. It's pretty clear.
So wrapping it up, our deep dive really points to this strong link. Pope's favorite foods very often reflect their cultural roots, especially their nationality.
It's a surprisingly humanizing detail, isn't it? Thinking about these global figures just enjoying a taste of home.
It really is. It kind of grounds them, shows how deeply our identities are tied to what we eat.
Absolutely. And maybe something for you listening to think about. How do your own food choices tell your story? What does your favorite meals say about where you come from or who you are? Okay, get this. There's a fan-made game, a visual novel, parodying My Little Pony shipping, and it has 87 different endings.
87. Wow. That's a lot for a fan project.
Right. So welcome to the deep dive. Today we're jumping into My Little Pony super ethical shipping climax. Its creator, Careful, and this whole, phenomenon of shipping in the MLP fandom.
And it's kind of fascinating because this one game, it really opens a window into fan creativity, online communities, that sort of thing.
Exactly. So whether you're maybe curious about game development or fan culture or just wondering what on earth shipping even means.
We're aiming to give you a good picture, a quick but thorough look.
Yeah, without getting lost in the weeds, we've looked at, well, the usual suspects.
Yeah.
Fan wikis, some articles on Equestria Daily, Equestria Gaming.
TV tropes, of course. You always end up there.
Huh, don't you just. And the games page on itch.io, that's a platform where indie creators share stuff directly, plus a bit about the creator.
So the mission today is basically to unpack this seemingly niche thing and see what it tells us about fandom and creativity online.
Let's do it. So first off, what is My Little Pony? Super ethical shipping climax.
Okay, so it's a visual novel, right? Like an interactive story game. Fan-made.
And the core idea is parody. It's making fun of or maybe celebrating shipping, fans pairing up characters romantically.
And it does it with humor. The tone is described as SFW-ish.
SFW-ish, meaning?
Safe for work.
Yeah.
Ish. So PG to M rating. There are sexual references, innuendo, but apparently no, explicit pornographic stuff. It's playful.
Gotcha. And it's set way back in the early days of Friendship is Magic, which is a nice touch for older fans.
Oh, yeah.
Twilight's still a unicorn, not an alicorn. You've got early Discord. The Cutie Mark Crusaders still trying to get their marks. Real nostalgia fuel.
Nice. And those 87 endings you mentioned.
Yeah.
That implies a lot of branching path.
Totally. Huge replayability. You can grab it on itch.io. Runs on Windows, Mac, Linux, even Android.
Oh, and didn't you say something about language options?
Yes. Get this. Besides English, there are gag options like English and Tabernac.
Okay, that's definitely a sign of a passion project. So who's the creator? Careful.
Yeah, Careful. Apparently, they used to go by Caramel Truffle. Their profile is pretty simple. Just says, just a guy wanting to make the world a better place.
Simple but sweet. We know a bit more, though, right? Like they're French-Canadian.
That's right. Based in Canada and works in healthcare IT.
Which is interesting, isn't it? Shows the diverse backgrounds people in fandoms have, not just artists or writers.
Absolutely. And Careful has this online persona, a goofy lion unicorn hybrid persona.
Ah, okay. So involved in the furry community as well, sounds like.
Seems that way, yeah. They have a Safe for Work Twitter linked. It just paints a picture of someone really engaged in these online creative spaces. Clearly a big MLP fan doing this for the love of it.
Makes sense. And the game is all about shipping. Maybe we should quickly define that for anyone unfamiliar.
Good idea. So shipping is basically when fans imagine romantic relationships between characters. Often these are pairs that aren't actually together in the official show or book or whatever. It's a huge part of fan culture.
And it's not just like the obvious pairings, right?
Yeah.
The sources mentioned a really wide range.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
You see fans pairing characters of the same sex, characters who barely interact in canon, sometimes even non-humanoid characters. It's all over the place.
Fans get really invested. They have their OTPs.
Right. One true pairing. Your absolute favorite ship. And they talk about whether a ship has sailed, meaning it became canon, or sunk.
So how did the community react to this game, this parody of their shipping?
Pretty well, it seems. On itch.io, it's got a 4.5 out of 5 rating. People describe it as cute, wholesome, even Meta.
Meta, huh? It's
Yeah.
aware of itself.
Yeah, exactly. There were discussions on Reddit, and Equestria Daily, which is a big MLP news site, covered its final release. They highlighted the word count, the endings, the parody aspect.
And I saw something about people digging into the code.
Yeah.
To find all the endings.
Yeah.
Which shows, real dedication, maybe trying to fully understand the creator's take on shipping.
That level of engagement is something else. And it references other fan stuff, too.
It does, yeah. Other MLP fan games really leans into the parody angle, acknowledging it's part of this bigger fan ecosystem.
What about those tropes you mentioned, like TV tropes stuff?
Oh, right. There's art style dissonance. Apparently the backgrounds are super detailed, but the pony characters are drawn in a simpler, kind of chibi style.
Okay, that can be a funny contrast.
And a lot of the true ends, the longer, maybe creator-preferred endings, involve fetch quests. Like, you got to go do tasks for different characters to get the good ending for a specific ship.
Sounds like typical game stuff, but applied to shipping. Any other weird ones?
Well, there's apparently a screw yourself trope where your character can meet and possibly romance a literal copy of themselves.
Ah, okay, that's definitely playing with the concept. And the idea of true ends being the author's favorites is interesting, too. Suggests Careful has their own preferred ships they wanted to highlight.
Plus that self-aware humor, like the take our word for it trope about Rarity's hat being amazing, but you never really see it described in detail.
Right. It just sounds very self-aware, fourth wall breaking at times, and it all circles back to that nostalgia for the early show.
So when you pull back, what's the main takeaway from this whole deep dive into super ethical shipping climax?
I think it just really shines a light on how vibrant and, well, creative online fandoms can be. It's not just a game, it feels like a commentary, a humorous look at fan culture itself made with real affection for the source material.
Yeah, absolutely. Which leaves us and you with something to think about.
Mm-hmm.
How do these fandoms grow and make their own things?
Yeah.
What does that tell us about how we connect with media, with stories?
And maybe what other totally unexpected, amazing, maybe slightly bonkers creative projects are bubbling away in online communities you haven't even heard of yet? Something to consider.
Okay, so let's dive into this. You brought up something new. Gemini Deep Dive podcasts.
Yeah, it's Google's Gemini AI generating these audio discussions. Pretty interesting stuff.
Right. Our mission here is to sort of unpack what they are, how they're actually made, what you get from them.
And crucially, what it all means for, staying informed without drowning in text.
Exactly. It's this intersection of AI and audio. Your sources suggest the AI creates these conversations.
Conversations that sound quite natural, aiming to explain complex topics, making dense info more accessible.
So just to be clear, what are these Gemini Deep Dive podcasts?
Well, fundamentally, they're AI-generated audio discussions.
From Google's Gemini, most likely.
Seems so. And the goal is to mimic a natural chat between two, virtual hosts.
To make complex stuff easier to grasp.
That's the idea. More engaging than just, reading a dry summary. That conversational style helps.
Okay, so how does that actually happen? How are they generated?
It looks like it uses something called the audio overview feature in the Gemini app. Ah, okay. And you feed it text.
Yeah, text-based content, documents, research papers, slides, even email threads.
Like Notebook LM you mentioned. Up to 50 sources.
Exactly like Notebook LM in that sense. You can point it to Drive files, URLs, YouTube vids, or just paste text.
And then the AI just figures it out.
Pretty much. It uses natural language processing, NLP, to understand the main points, the themes.
Finds the connections between different parts.
Right. It summarizes, draws those connections, saves you a ton of work sifting through it all.
And then it actually writes a script for 2 AI voices.
Yeah, a script for 2 virtual hosts. And you can apparently give it some brief instructions like focus on what's new, that kind of thing.
And that script becomes audio.
Through text-to-speech,
Yeah.
TTS technology. But the key is making it sound human. Natural intonation, pacing.
So the AI does the whole thing, from reading to talking.
That seems to be the process. Understand the input, structure a conversation, generate the audio, potentially very efficient for learning.
Okay, let's talk content. What's actually in these podcasts? Well, it's directly based on whatever you upload. So if you give it, say, an academic paper.
Like on AI benchmarks?
Yeah, exactly. The podcast would likely summarize its arguments, maybe discuss Gemini 2.5's performance, if that's in the paper.
Explore the implications.
stuff like that. Precisely. It gives you the main ideas, maybe some analysis connecting different sections, perhaps even some extra context or perspective generated by the AI.
Oh, it could be really useful for students, researchers.
Or anyone needing a quick overview of dense material. Yeah. Business reports, class notes, faster learning.
The human-sounding part.
Yeah.
How do they pull that off if it's all AI?
It seems to be a combination, sophisticated NLP, creating dialogue that feels conversational.
Like with questions, agreements, maybe even interruptions?
Potentially, yeah. And then the TTS is advanced enough to produce voices that sound, well, really natural. Intonation, emphasis, maybe even the odd
Mimicking a real back and forth.
Right. The structure itself is conversational. Transitions, clarifications, but importantly, no actual humans involved in the creation.
Are there limitations? Things it can't do?
Based on related tools, yeah. It sounds like you can't control the length, at least not yet.
No editing the script either, or choosing speaker names.
Doesn't seem like it currently. Those kinds of customization options might be missing for now.
Okay, so benefits and drawbacks. Upside, fast, probably free if you're a subscriber, engaging format.
Human-like sound, intuitive.
Downside, limited customization, maybe a bit niche initially, aimed at students, researchers.
That seems to be the starting point. Though you mentioned business versions are being piloted for related tools like Notebook LM.
Right, which suggests maybe a bigger ecosystem is planned.
Could be. More tailored experiences down the line.
So looking ahead, as of early May 2025, this audio overview is still rolling out.
Yeah, gradually. Plans for more languages, maybe more features eventually.
So what's the big takeaway here for you, the listener?
Well, it's a potentially powerful new way to get up to speed on complex topics quickly. Turn that dense report into an audio chat.
A shortcut,
Yeah.
essentially. But it is AI generated.
And that's the really interesting part, isn't it? It's incredibly efficient, but you need to think about what might be missing.
Like nuance, human perspective,
Yeah.
critical analysis beyond just summarizing.
Exactly. Is the AI just connecting dots? Or is it truly understanding? Could it miss biases in the source material or lack diverse viewpoints?
That definitely leaves you with something to think about as AI gets better at this kind of information delivery.
How do you balance that speed and convenience?
With the deeper engagement, the critical thinking that comes from, wrestling with the material yourself.
It's a fascinating space to watch. This deep dive really just scratches the surface of where this might be headed.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're jumping into the really fascinating history of flight right here in Alberta.
Yeah, it's quite a story. We've got this timeline, and it shows just how quickly things developed.
Exactly. Our mission really is to see how Alberta went from, those very first shaky flights to the jet age so fast.
It's amazing, and it really parallels the global story, but with its own sort of Alberta flavor.
Right. So, okay, context first. We had those early pioneers globally, Ader in France, McCurdy making Canada's first flight in 2009.
And Blériot crossing the English Channel that same year. Big moments that got everyone thinking.
So when did Alberta actually see its first flight?
Well, the records point to Hugh A. Robinson. That was in Edmonton back in 1911.
1911, wow. And they needed places to fly from, right?
Yeah, pretty quickly you saw these makeshift airfields pop up near the Edmonton racetrack, Bonus Park in Calgary.
Basic strips, I imagine.
Oh, yeah. And early pilots like Fred McCall, Jock Palmer, W.L. Rutledge, they were the ones taking the risks in those pretty fragile early machines.
Fragile's probably an understatement. Then World War I comes along.
And everything changes. Flying suddenly had a very serious and, frankly, dangerous purpose.
How dangerous?
Incredibly. The life expectancy for airmen, especially early on, was terribly short. You had guys like Jimmy Bell from Edmonton getting minimal training in England and then thrown into combat, flying things like the Sopwith Camel or maybe training in an Avro 504K.
Tough. Even famous names like Billy Bishop started differently.
Right, exactly. He started as an observer, not a pilot initially. The war just pushed aircraft development and use forward at, well, an incredible pace.
Okay, so after the war, things shifted again, back towards maybe entertainment.
You got it. Barnstorming. In 1916, even during the war, Catherine Stinson, an American pilot, came up.
She flew here.
Yep, Calgary and Edmonton, doing stunts in her Curtiss biplane. People loved it. It really helped sell the idea of flying to the public.
And Alberta had its own local stars.
For sure. George Gorman, the famous Wapame, Fred McCall, they were all big names in the Alberta barnstorming scene.
And Wapame, there's that famous story involving the Red Baron.
Ah, yes, a legendary encounter. Arthur Roy Brown flying a Sopwith Camel is credited with shooting down Manfred von Richthofen,
The Red Baron.
the top German ace. And in that same dogfight, the story goes, Brown essentially saved Wap May, who was a novice pilot at the time.
Incredible. So these planes weren't just for war and stunts. Mail delivery started early, too.
Absolutely. Catherine Stinson, again in 1918, she flew the first airmail delivery in Western Canada.
Where from?
Calgary to Edmonton. This was right after Canada's very first official airmail flight happened out east. Shows how quickly the idea spread.
And post-war, lots of planes were suddenly available.
Exactly. Military surplus, especially the Curtiss JN4, the Jenny. Relatively affordable trainers.
So more people could get into flying.
Precisely. It fueled a big boom in pleasure flying and more burnstorming. Edmonton even got a gifted JN4, and Wap May actually rented it out, that specific plane. It's still around at the Reynolds, Alberta Museum.
Cool. And this availability led to actual businesses forming.
Yes. 1919, Wap May, his brother Court, and George Gorman formed May Airplanes Ltd.
What was their first job?
Flying copies of the Edmonton Journal newspaper to Wetaskiwin. They set up their own field, Mayfield, thinking about aerial photography, mapping, big plans.
And Fred McCall was involved, too.
Yep, he joined them in barnstorming, famously landed his plane on a carousel at the Calgary Stampede.
No way. On a carousel.
That's the story. Shows the kind of daring stunts they pulled.
And tackling the Rockies. That must have been next level.
Definitely. Ernest C. Hoy flew mail from Vancouver to Calgary in 1919. Had to make stops, of course, but it was the first flight over the Rockies.
Fred McCall seems to pop up a lot.
He was key. Bought his own Jenny, started McCall Aero Corporation, and that same year, 1919, he flew Santa Claus into Calgary.
How'd he manage that?
Apparently used searchlights mounted on the wings. Imagine seeing that.
Huh. Amazing. But things started getting more formal soon. Regulations.
Yep, by 1920, you needed licenses for pilots and planes. First passenger flights started between Edmonton and Calgary, too.
And bush flying must have been crucial for Alberta.
Oh, hugely important. Guys like Donald McLaren used flying boats like the Curtiss HS-2L for fishery patrols, surveys up north.
Yeah.
Connecting remote areas became possible.
Infrastructure had to follow, right? Airports.
For sure. Wap May and Harry Adair pushed for a proper airport in Edmonton. It became Canada's first licensed airport in 1926. Calgary got its Aero Club, too.
Were women involved in piloting early on?
Yes. Gertrude de la Vergne, she became Alberta's first licensed woman pilot in 1928, a real trailblazer.
And the late 20s saw some incredible long-distance and Mercy flights.
Truly remarkable. Punch Dickens flew across the unmapped Arctic Barrens, and then there was Wap May and Vic Horner's flight in 28.
The diphtheria run.
That's the one. Flew antitoxin to Little Red River in the dead of winter, a heroic Mercy flight, saved lives.
Just shows how vital aviation was becoming. The Arctic flights continued.
They did. Punch Dickens flew the first airmail to the Arctic in 29. Wap May's Commercial Airways started official mail routes up the Mackenzie. Calgary opened its first municipal airport that year, too.
Then came the bigger airlines in the 30s.
Right. Western Canada Airways started Prairie Airmail, eventually merging into Canadian Airways Ltd. Wap May even helped the RCMP track the Mad Trapper by air.
Wow. And consolidation continued.
Yep, Commercial merged with Canadian Airways, and then TransCanada Airlines, TCA, started passenger service across the country in 37, linking Edmonton and Lethbridge.
Calgary got its current airport around then.
Construction started in 38, opened in 39, named McCall Field later. TCA added Calgary to its routes once the new airport was ready.
And World War II brought another huge role for Alberta aviation.
Massive. George McConaughey started service to the Yukon, his company later becoming part of Canadian Pacific Airlines. And crucially, Alberta was central to the British Commonwealth Air Training Plan.
Training pilots from all over.
Thousands. So many key Alberta aviation figures were involved in the BCATP. It was a vital contribution to the war effort.
What about after the war?
The pioneering didn't stop. Max Ward started his bush flying career, founded Ward Air, eventually flew to the North Pole. Edmonton planned its international airport. Jets started arriving in the 60s.
Things really modernized then.
Yeah, TCA became Air Canada in 65. CP Air emerged. Canada's Aviation Hall of Fame was established in Edmonton in 73, fittingly.
And incredibly, Alberta's reach extended even beyond the atmosphere.
That's right. Astronauts like Robert Thirsk, Mark Garneau, Roberta Bondar, Chris Hadfield, Dina Brasseur, all with Alberta connections from those first fragile flights.
It's an unbelievable trajectory, that pioneering spirit, that innovation. It really shaped modern travel, didn't it?
It absolutely did. Makes you wonder, what's the next leap going to be for Alberta's aviation story? Where do we go from here?
Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're jumping into something a bit different.
Yeah, interactive fiction.
Exactly. Think choose your own adventure style, but all text-based.
And often, like, wonderfully strange. We've sifted through a bunch of these.
Right. And our mission, basically, is to see what pops up again and again. Themes, characters, weird plot twists, that kind of thing.
It's interesting because it's not passive. You know, your choices really matter. They shape the whole thing.
Totally. It's a cool way to see how stories can branch out.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so first stop, Applejack's Apple Barn. You show up, it looks like a normal family reunion.
For about 5 seconds, yeah.
Yeah, right. Then you might run into someone claiming to be Applejack. Or maybe her lost twin. Or even Pinkie Pie doing, like, poetry quotes.
It gets absurd fast. And that humor, the sudden lost twin thing, that's kind of the point, isn't it?
Seems like it. Breaking the fourth wall, maybe?
Yeah, sort of winking at you, acknowledging it's a game. Makes you think about the how of the story, not just the what.
Plus, you can actually do farm stuff, like catching apples. Apparently, it gets super intense.
Oh, yeah. Competitive apple catching.
Apparently. And then there's Brayburn, who's, well, he's very forward.
Uh-huh. Some options there are definitely memorable. Even offering a sugar cube feels loaded.
It's such a tonal shift. Cozy farm, then weird humor, then,
Yeah.
you know.
Keeps you guessing, right?
And you keep leaving and coming back, maybe with new stuff. Shows it's a connected little world, even with all the oddities.
Okay, let's hop over to Rarity's place. Carousel Boutique.
Right. Very different vibe, elegant.
You can help her out, design hats, sort her ledger. Standard stuff. Kinda.
Kinda. But then your dialogue options can be like, shall your doom tear you apart?
Exactly. Or those constant hints about a cupboard ending. What even is that?
Who knows? It feels like a running gag, playing with the idea of endings in these games. And you can find things, like a Ruby, classic adventure game feel mixed in.
And some paths just go way off track. Helping with the ledger suddenly turns into a hoof massage. Yeah. Or that true ending thing with the blindfolds and like a KFH ad. Just completely out of left field.
So random.
But that's the strategy, I think. Undermine your expectations constantly. Keep it unpredictable.
Okay, onward to Rainbow Dash. Up in her cloud house.
And she's usually, what, searching under her bed for something?
Pretty much. You can offer to help or comment on her plot, which seems like an inside joke.
Probably, yeah. A meta joke about her role.
If you ask her how to be cooler, you get sunglasses.
Naturally.
Ask how to be stronger.
Dumbbell.
It's so perfectly her, but like dialed up.
Exactly. The humor comes straight from exaggerating her known traits.
Then Derpy shows up, looking for her muffin.
Ah, the muffin quest.
You can give her one if you happen to have it, or...
Well, things get weird again. There's that infamous shower line.
Which gets immediately shut down.
Right. With a comment about the game being PG. Super self-aware.
That's a key thing here. The game knows it's a game and points it out, often for laughs.
Okay, last stop. Fluttershy's cottage. Much calmer, right?
Hey.
Animals everywhere. Yeah, definitely a quieter atmosphere at first.
You can try petting the bunny, Angel,
Yeah.
or even petting Fluttershy herself, which gets awkward.
Very awkward reactions, yeah. And wasn't there a bit where two Fluttershys meet?
Yes. So surreal, just playing with the whole avatar interaction thing. And she keeps offering tea, which might be more than just tea.
Right, the potentially aphrodisiac tea, another curveball.
Plus a quest for a special book that seems to hint at, like, censorship or mature stuff.
More meta commentary.
And then, totally out of nowhere, a snowball fight. Some random cameo.
And more comments about the cameo being useless. It's relentless.
So stepping back, what's the big picture here? What ties all this strangeness together?
Well, I think it's that mix, you know? The blend of, like, genuine character stuff with complete, utter absurdity.
Yeah, the characters still feel like themselves, mostly.
Mostly. Even when they're in ridiculous situations.
Wow.
And the constant surprise factor, the meta jokes, the way your choices make these weird things happen. That's the core of it.
It really makes you realize how interactive stories, even lighthearted ones, can be pretty insightful.
For sure. It shows how different choices build totally different experiences.
So, a final thought for you, listening. When you get to make the choices in a story like this, what does that say about what you actually want from a narrative?
Yeah, how does having that control change how you see the story? Or even the characters? Something to think about. Welcome to the deep dive. So you sent over some really interesting stuff from the Comics Lab at professorgarfield.org.
Yeah, that's right.
And today we're going to try and sort of break down the basics, the fundamentals of making a simple comic strip. You know, funny.
Exactly. It's all about visual storytelling, humor, getting those core ideas down.
Right. So the mission really is to get a good handle on that. We've got sources on characters, humor, ideas, writing, even templates.
It's a pretty complete package for getting started. A good foundation.
Okay, so let's kick off with characters. The site emphasizes starting with personality, like are they young or old, what do they like, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and they stress making it fun. That personality seed, it kind of dictates everything else.
Okay.
And they have this cool character builder tool. Lets you play around with heads, eyes, different features.
Ah, right, I saw that. And they mentioned exaggerating things, like bigger eyes or ears for humor.
Exactly. That's a key tip they offer. Why do you reckon that works?
Well, I guess it makes them stand out more visually, kind of punchy, maybe a bit silly, instantly.
Yeah, I think so too. It signals funny right away. And they even suggest mixing things up, like a human head on a, dog's body or something.
Huh, yeah, for that unexpected funny visual.
Precisely. It's about creating something slightly absurd from the get-go.
Okay, so moving on to humor itself, the lab breaks it down, right?
Yeah.
Verbal and pantomime.
That's it. Verbal is all about the words, jokes, ridders, clever phrasing.
And they use that Mrs. Brown example, which I thought was great. Swapping dress for muumuu or food for pork chops.
Yeah, it shows how just picking a funnier, more specific word can make a difference.
Like using noggin instead of head or kisser for face, that kind of thing.
Exactly. It's those little word choices. But then you've got pantomime.
Right. No words at all, just pictures telling the joke.
Like those classic Garfield strips. He wants food, he does something, there's a visual punchline, setup, action, payoff.
Yeah, cat looks hungry, cat sees milk, cat drinks milk, splash.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And they point out you can stretch that over like multiple panels, but keep the same basic idea. Setup, dot action, dot visual result.
Okay, so you've got your character, maybe some ideas about humor, but where do the actual ideas come from? That's always the big question, isn't it?
It really is. And their answer is, well, simple.
Yeah.
Everywhere.
Everywhere.
Yeah. Look at your own life, friends, family, ordinary stuff. Like maybe the pizza delivery person does something funny. That could be a spark.
Okay. So real life.
Definitely. And they have this exercise tool, character, action, results.
Oh, yeah. How's that work?
You just fill in the blanks. Boy, jumps in water, belly flop, boom, basic idea.
Simple. So, like, don't overthink it. Just start playing.
Exactly. Have fun with it.
Yeah.
That seems key.
Okay, so you have an idea. Now, rhythm. They talk about writing rhythm. What's that about?
Well, it's how the joke unfolds, how you guide the reader. They focus a lot on the classic 3-panel strip.
3 panels. Okay, so what's the structure there?
Panel 1, that's your setup. You introduce the situation, the start of the joke. Got it.
Panel 2. That's often called the beat. It could be a pause, or maybe it builds on the setup a little, creates anticipation.
Okay, setup beat.
And panel 3, bang, bang, the punchline, the payoff. They use those Garfield examples, like the rubber mousey or the birthday cake nightmare one.
Right, I remember those.
Yeah.
Setup, beat, punchline. Makes sense.
And sometimes, the setup might take a couple of panels, like the fetch example or the one about the all-remote channel.
Ah, okay, so the setup can stretch.
Yeah, but you still end with that final panel delivering the punch. It's all about the timing.
And then just quickly, they mentioned templates, 3-panel, 6-panel.
Yeah, just basic grids, structures to help you actually, lay out the panels on the page, like a blueprint.
Okay, so wrapping it all up then.
Yeah.
It sounds like the core things are design fun characters, use visual gags and maybe funny words, get ideas from everywhere, and structure it with that setup, beat, punchline rhythm.
That's pretty much the essence of it, yeah. Character, humor, ideas, and rhythm within those panels. So here's a final thought for you listening. Think about the funny little things you see or hear every day. Someone's odd expression, maybe a clumsy moment. Could those be turned into a visual story? How could you frame those everyday absurdities, maybe add a visual punchline, and make your own little comic moment? Something to chew on.
Definitely something to think about.
Thanks for driving deep with us today. Welcome to the deep dive. So you were interested in how to get your head around complex systems quickly.
Yeah.
And we figured, well, what's more complex than video game controls sometimes? specifically ARMA 3.
Oh, definitely. It's a great example.
We've got the two main default control sets here. The actual default one and the industry standard one.
Right.
And the idea is just to kind of unpack them, see what the thinking might be behind these different layouts.
But right off of that, you look at these mappings and wow.
Yeah.
There are so many keys assigned. It really shouts depth,
Yeah.
Like this game expects a lot from you.
Totally. It signals realism, complexity, whether you're just walking around or flying a helicopter.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder about those design choices.
Exactly. Like, why so many options?
Okay, so let's dive in. Maybe start with just basic movement on foot. Seems simple, but...
But it's not, really, in ARMA 3.
Yeah.
So the default scheme, it breaks things down quite a bit. W is run.
Yeah.
But shift plus W is forward.
Wait, run isn't forward.
Not exactly the default forward, no. W alone is like a jog or run. Shift plus W is a slower standard forward walk.
Oh.
Then left shift is sprint, like full tilt.
Okay.
And C is tactical pace. Slower, quieter, more careful. And leaning is Q and E, pretty standard there.
Gotcha. So very distinct modes. How does industry standard handle it?
It kind of merges things.
Yeah.
Shift plus W is both sprint and hold breath for aiming. W is just forward, the basic move.
Simpler, more familiar maybe?
Probably, yeah. And crouch moves from, I think, X in default to left control, which is very common in other FPS games.
Oh, okay.
Leaning is still Q and E. But S, the back key, also doubles as combat pace or sights over when you tap it, maybe. A slightly faster ready stance walk.
So straight away, a real difference in feel, I bet.
Absolutely. Default feels granular, like you're deliberately choosing your exact movement speed. Industry standard feels faster, maybe.
Yeah.
More fluid if you're used to other shooters.
Consolidating actions onto fewer keys. Quicker access, maybe, but less explicit control.
Exactly. That's the trade-off, it seems. Nuance versus potentially faster, more familiar actions.
Okay, what about handling your gear? Weapons, items, that kind of stuff.
Well, some things were the same. 1, 2, 3 for weapon switching. Pretty universal. R for reload. Everyone expects that.
Standard stuff. But you mentioned a twist.
Yeah, the throwing keys. This was kind of weird. In default, G is throw grenade. Makes sense, G for grenade.
Huh?
But in industry standard, G is throw items like chem lights, smokes maybe, and T is throw grenade.
They swapped them?
They swap G and T between grenades and other throwables. And even the light laser key moves from G in default to L in industry standard.
Huh. Why swap the throw keys? Any idea?
It's interesting, right? Maybe industry standard assumes T is a common binding for throw actions in other games and prioritize grenade for that.
Or maybe default thinks G for grenade is just more intuitive and T is for other thrown things.
Could be. It might subtly nudge players about priorities. Like, is the grenade the primary throwable or just one of many? It's a small thing, but it's curious.
Definitely. Okay, vehicles and aircraft. Big part of ARMA. Must be complex there, too.
Oh, yeah. Let's just hit a highlight. Steering.
Yeah.
In default, cars use A and D to steer left and right. Simple.
Like most driving games.
Right. But in industry standard, in aircraft, A and D are used for banking left and right, rolling the aircraft.
More like a flight sim control.
Exactly. Rudders for yaw are usually separate, maybe Z and X. So industry standard goes for more realism in the air there.
And looking around, that's crucial in a vehicle.
Default is pretty consistent. Q and E for leaning on foot are also used for free looking left and right in vehicles and aircraft. Keeps it simple.
Okay.
Industry standard keeps Q and E for infantry leaning, but the view controls in vehicles can shift around a bit, probably because A and D are busy doing other things like banking.
So consistency in default versus maybe more specialized controls in industry standard for vehicles.
Seems like it. Depends what you value more, I guess.
Right. Last big area, commanding your AI squad. F keys for selecting units.
Yeah, F1 through F10 or so, that's the same in both. Standard RT tactical game stuff. Select Unit 1, Unit 2, etc.
But getting to the actual command.
Different shortcuts.
Yeah.
The main menu, the complex command menu with all the options. Yeah. In default, it's left control plus spacebar. A 2-key combo.
Deliberate action.
Feels like it. In industry standard, it's just left control. Quicker, maybe easier to hit accidentally.
And is there a quicker command option too?
Yep. Quick command. Usually context-sensitive stuff like move there or attack that. In default, that's the 0 key, way over on the number row.
Kind of out of the way.
Yeah. In industry standard, it's left alt, much closer to the WASD cluster.
Okay, so industry standard seems to make both the complex menu and the quick commands faster to access.
Definitely seems tilted towards quicker command inputs. Default maybe wants you to pause and think more for the complex stuff, keeping the quick command key separate.
Interesting distinction. So if we try and kind of sum this up, the default scheme feels like it prioritizes very specific control states, especially for movement, granularity, and maybe a more separated approach to command menus.
Yeah, detailed control. While industry standard leans into conventions from other FPS games, consolidates some actions, and seems to want faster access, particularly for commands and common actions, like sprinting.
Smoother transition for some players, perhaps,
Yep.
but maybe less fine-tuned control in certain areas.
Could be, yeah.
So you've got these two pretty different philosophies baked into the same game's options. It raises a really interesting point for you, the listener, to think about.
Right. Which approach actually serves you better in a high-pressure tactical situation? Is it the detailed, deliberate control of default, or the faster, possibly more familiar feel of industry standard?
And why would the developers offer both? What does that say about how they view their players or the balance they're trying to strike between deep simulation and just accessibility?
Yeah, it's a classic game design puzzle, really. Depth versus ease of learning. Definitely
Right.
something to chew on.
Welcome to the deep dive. Ever notice those blue signs pointing the way to tourist spots when you're driving around Quebec?
Oh, yeah, those blue ones. They're pretty distinctive.
Exactly. So today we're diving into the official program behind them, specifically for private tourist facilities. It's called the Programme de Signalisation Touristique Équipement Touristique Privé.
Mm-hmm. We're looking at how places get those signs and what it, signals to you as a traveler.
Right. Our source is the government document outlining this whole thing.
It's interesting. They don't just see them as directions. The document actually calls them a gesture of welcome.
A gesture of welcome.
Uh-huh.
Huh, I like that. It's about making things easier, safer for tourists, maybe?
Yeah, helping you find your way in unfamiliar places. It's part of a bigger system, but we're zeroing in on the signs for privately owned spots. That program kicked off back in 1988.
Okay, 1988. And it's key to note, this isn't like commercial advertising, right?
They're strictly directional. The main goals were pretty clear.
Hmm.
Make it simpler to get to tourist places, have uniform, safe signs everywhere,
Uniformity, okay.
and kind of show off the variety of what Quebec offers tourists. The hope is you'll stay longer if you see what's around.
Makes sense. And how's it funded?
Well, it's designed to pay for itself.
Right.
The businesses participating actually pay fees for the signs. It's all about meeting that expectation of, Quebecois hospitality.
Gotcha. So self-funded and focused on guidance. What about the guiding principles? You mentioned uniformity.
Right. Uniformity is big. Same blue color, white text and border, standard pictograms, size depends on the road, all set by the Ministry of Transport.
And it's meant to guide you the whole way there.
Pretty much, yeah, on whatever road network gets you to the site. And accessibility is key, too. It should be open to any private facility that meets the criteria.
Okay, so let's talk eligibility. Who can get one of these signs? What kind of places are we talking about?
It's a pretty wide range, actually. Think attractions, activities, places to stay, campgrounds, all geared towards tourists.
Like, what specifically? Any examples?
Sure. Under cultural attractions, you've got things like aquariums, but they need interpretation activities. Art centers, museums recognized by the province, heritage sites.
Okay.
For natural sites, maybe a cool geographical spot, wildlife observation centers with permits, of course, bird watching areas, even those ZECs, the controlled hunting and fishing zones.
ZECs, right. What about like farms or wineries? Agritourism.
Yep, that's covered too.
Oh,
You pick farms, sugar shacks doing tastings, farm stays, and artisan producers like cideries, microbreweries, vineyards, provided they have permits, offer tastings, interpretation, that kind of thing.
so quite a bit there. Recreational stuff too.
Definitely. Casinos, places renting out kayaks or canoes, spas with specific standards, go-karting tracks with safety rules, ski hills, golf courses, again, usually with minimum requirements like number of slopes or holes,
And accommodation.
all sorts. Hostels, campgrounds, nudist camps they call nature centers, vacation centers, resorts, hotels, motels, B&Bs or gîtes, as long as they're small, like 5 rooms max, even ready-to-camp spots like yurts.
Wow, okay. That's comprehensive. Are there basic rules that apply to everyone?
Yeah. Some fundamentals. You got to be a legit tourist service, follow the laws, be registered, have road access, minimum opening hours, a proper welcome area, be listed on official tourism sites, parking, restrooms, serve visitors passing through, especially in high season.
Standard stuff. So what's not included? What kind of place wouldn't get a blue sign?
Well, restaurants and gas stations usually have their own separate signage programs
Right.
and things mostly for locals, the town hall, libraries, sports arenas. Those aren't typically eligible. Same for purely retail places like shopping malls or flea markets.
Yeah.
And places like gyms or bowling alleys are generally out too.
Got it. Now, I saw something about major attractions. What's that designation?
Yeah. That's a special category. It's for the really big players, the ones pulling in lots of visitors from outside the region, even outside Quebec. Think like flagship tourist destinations, but not just lodging places.
So harder to qualify for that.
Definitely. You need a thumbs up from the Regional Tourism Association, meet the definition, obviously meet the basic criteria we talked about, plus be heavily promoted outside Quebec, maybe operate year-round, and crucially prove you get a certain minimum number of visitors each year. That number varies by region and needs to be validated by an accountant.
And the payoff.
Yeah.
Better sign placement.
Sometimes, yeah. They might get signs on specific highway corridors near big cities, places usually reserved, more visibility.
Okay, let's picture the signs themselves. Blue background, white border. What else?
Standard pictograms, little pictures representing the activity, usually 1 to 4 pictures per sign. If there's no good pictogram, they just use the facility's name.
Any rules on combining them?
Yeah, specific guidelines for that. And the text, like the name, has character limits. Plus, you always get a directional arrow and the distance in kilometers.
How far out do the signs start?
Placement's pretty thought out. You might get pre-signage on a highway, then confirmation at the exit, then direction signs at turns, and finally one right at the entrance. Generally, they don't signpost for more than 20 kilometers away.
Only 20 kilometers. Any exception?
A few, maybe for really remote places or certain numbered routes or major ski centers. And if there's a busy intersection with too many eligible spots wanting a sign,
What happens then?
there might be a selection process. Sometimes they have to share a sign, maybe seasonally, or use group signage listing multiple places.
Right, makes sense. So who foots the bill for all this? We mentioned the businesses pay fees.
Exactly. The establishment pays for everything, making the sign, putting it up, maintaining it. It's usually based on a 3-year contract. The rates are online somewhere.
And who runs the whole program?
It's a joint effort. The Ministry of Tourism sets the policy. The Ministry of Transport handles the standards for the signs themselves, approves locations. But the actual day-to-day management, installation, all that, that's currently handled by a concessionaire, a company called Senior Service, which is part of the Alliance de l'Industrie Touristique du Québec.
Okay, seems like a well-oiled machine.
Yeah, there's a clear step-by-step process for businesses to apply.
So, wrapping this up, Quebec's got this really structured system for its blue tourist signs for private spots. It tries to balance being open to many businesses with keeping things uniform and recognizable.
And it's funded by the places that benefit. What really stands out is how detailed the criteria are. It suggests they really want to point you towards established quality experiences.
Yeah, it definitely feels like that. It makes you appreciate how something like good signage, which maybe you don't think about much, can really make exploring a place easier, more enjoyable.
Absolutely.
So maybe something for you to think about, like what other sort of invisible details really make a difference in your own travel experiences? That's your food for thought from this deep dive. Until next time. Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we've got a real head scratcher for you.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, our source material is this. Well, bizarre collection of characters and symbols. First, Tenabai,
Okay.
then Stito, followed by just 21.
21.
Then this one, Poop, looks Cyrillic.
Yeah. Cyrillic letters there.
And finally, Oak, Greek, maybe?
Looks like Omicron Mu, yes. Quite the assortment, isn't it?
It really is. Looks, well, kind of like gibberish at first.
It does.
Yeah.
But, you know, our mission here is to see if we can dig in and find any potential meaning or even just patterns in these enigmatic bits.
Okay, let's dive right in then. Seeing Tanab and Stito right next to each other like that, what's the first thing that, jumps out?
Well, my initial thought, honestly, is maybe some kind of reversal. It's a pretty common way to obscure simple text.
Exactly. Yeah, read them backwards. You get I bumped and or it's almost like I don't, and it's toe or it's something.
Could be typo, sure, or maybe deliberate.
So does having two potential reversals like that, does that suggest anything more solid to you?
It certainly hints at a possible method or, maybe just a similar kind of error happening twice. It does make you wonder if the other pieces might involve some kind of transformation too.
Right. Then we hit this single 21 with that space before it. Feels disconnected somehow.
Yeah, it really stands out, doesn't it?
What could be the significance? The isolation, the number itself?
Well, the separation could mean it's just a distinct piece of information.
Hmm.
As for 21,
Mm-mm.
I mean, without any context, it's incredibly open-ended.
Sure.
Could be part of a code, could be a page number, a date,
Mm-hmm.
anything really. But its isolation, yeah, that definitely makes it pop.
Okay, following that, we get Oris. That
Yeah.
question mark right at the beginning obviously signals, well, a question.
Or uncertainty, perhaps.
And the Cyrillic bit, what do you make of that?
Yeah, the Cyrillic script points towards Russian, or maybe another Slavic language, Aris itself.
Ah.
It
What?
doesn't directly translate into a common English word that I know of.
So maybe a fragment.
It's possible. Could be part of a longer word, maybe retro,
Yeah.
or even someone trying to spell something phonetically using Cyrillic. Hard to tell from just this.
It's like we're trying to assemble a puzzle with pieces from different boxes.
Exactly. And then we land on O, which feels different again. Those are definitely Greek letters.
Omicron and Mu.
Yes. And Om, of course, is, well, it's widely recognized. A sacred sound in Hinduism and other traditions represents, the universe, the fundamental vibration.
So its presence here, next to these other jumbled bits, is, well, it's quite striking, isn't it?
Very. It stands apart.
Okay, so summing up, we've got possible reversals, an isolated number, a potential foreign language fragment with a question mark, and this spiritual symbol. It's a real mix.
It is.
Does this lack of an obvious connection tell us anything useful in itself?
Oh, I think so. Absolutely. The sheer dissimilarity of these fragments.
Yeah, that could be the point.
How so? Well, it might suggest we're not looking for a single unified code or message. Maybe it's just a collection of unrelated items, perhaps from different sources, maybe intended for different interpretations.
Right. It sort of highlights how fragmented information can sometimes be.
Precisely. We encounter bits and pieces all the time.
So yeah, no simple answers today, it seems. But it is fascinating how even this seemingly random collection can spark so many different avenues of thought, about language, codes, symbols,
Yeah.
how we make meaning.
Absolutely. It just shows how our brains are wired, really. We're constantly hunting for patterns, for coherence. Even when we're faced with what looks like nonsense, it's that innate curiosity.
That drive to understand.
Mm-hmm.
So for you listening, here's something to think about. Consider the everyday words, maybe signs or phrases around you, if you broke them down, like really broke them down into their basic parts, like we did today.
Could you see them in a totally new way?
Yeah. Could you unlock some different interpretation? What sort of unexpected meanings might just be hiding there right in plain sight?
Something to ponder.
Definitely. Thanks for taking this deep dive into the delightfully strange with us today.
Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Great to be here.
Today we're taking a look at Frédéric Molas. You probably know him better as Le Joueur du Grenier.
Yeah, the attic gamer. A really massive figure on the French YouTube scene, especially for video games.
Exactly. We've pulled info from places like Wikipedia, Babilio, IMDb.
The usual suspects for a good overview.
Right. And our mission basically is to get a handle on his career path, how he's influenced gaming culture over there, and maybe find some surprising bits along the way.
Sounds good. He's had quite the journey.
So where does it all kick off? His early days?
Well, it really starts with a genuine love for games, like proper passion from early on, especially the Sega Mega Drive. That seems to be a key influence.
The classic.
Totally.
Yeah.
And interestingly, his studies, he initially struggled a bit, did a multimedia license, but it wasn't quite the right fit, apparently.
Okay, so not a straight path.
Not exactly. But that kind of led him to pivot towards a more specialized audiovisual training.
Oh, okay.
And that's actually where he met Sébastien Rassiat.
The collaborator. Right. That name comes up a lot.
Absolutely fundamental. That partnership became, well, essential to everything that followed.
So that audiovisual training was pretty pivotal then.
Definitely seems like it. And then, not long after, 2009, boom.
Joueur du Grenier arrives on the scene.
Yeah, heavily inspired by the angry video game nerd, which was huge at the time.
Right, the U.S. equivalent. Sort of.
Exactly. And Mola's version just took off in France.
Big time, from what I gather.
Ooh.
Millions of subscribers, right? On the main channel and the secondary one.
Yeah, bizarre du Grenier as well. It was that mix, humor, nostalgia, looking back at those old, often frustrating retro games.
People really connected with that, huh?
Oh, definitely. It tapped into that shared experience, like you said, but also finding the funny side of how clunky some of those old games could be.
A bit cathartic, maybe. laughing at the pain?
Sort of, yeah. But he didn't just stick to that one thing.
No. He branched out.
Yeah, pretty quickly. He launched other projects like Papy Grenier.
Okay, what was that one about?
That focused more on, like, the good games, the classics that people actually loved.
Different angle.
And Bazar de Grenier became more of a mix. Playthroughs, movie reviews, just general stuff.
More variety.
Exactly. He even did promotional work for Capcom for Dragon's Dogma.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So working with big publishers, too.
Yeah, shows he wasn't just, stuck in the retro niche. He could adapt.
And his presence grew beyond just YouTube, didn't it?
Massively. He became a regular face at big French conventions, Toulouse Game Show, Japan Expo.
So a real community figure.
Totally. Plus doing Twitch streams, often collaborating with other French streamers and online folks.
Right. Building those connections.
And even voice acting. He had a role in the French dub of the 2023 Dungeons & Dragons movie.
No way. Okay, so he's really embedded in that whole geek culture sphere.
Pretty much. And he's
Yeah.
used that platform for, well, some pretty significant things too.
Like the charity work.
Exactly. His involvement in Z Event, which is this huge French charity streaming marathon.
I've heard of that, yeah. Raises serious money.
Seriously serious. Millions of euros over the years for groups like Institut Pasteur, Amnesty International, Action Against Hunger.
Wow. That's genuinely impressive. Really using his influence.
It adds a whole other layer, doesn't it? And speaking of layers, he's even gone physical.
Physical, how do you mean?
He opened a bar in 2023.
Get out, what kind of bar?
A pirate-themed bar called Arcadia in Fougères.
Okay, that's unexpected,
Yeah.
but cool.
Yeah, it's like taking that online community spirit and building a real-world space for it. Shows another side to him.
Definitely entrepreneurial.
Uh-huh.
And personally. We know he's married, right?
Yeah, to Serena Mola, Serena Chan online. She's involved in his videos sometimes too, I think.
Uh-huh.
And his interests, they really shine through. Big anime fan, Saint Seiya, Dragon Ball Z.
That's classics again.
And films like Jurassic Park, Back to the Future. It all feels very authentic.
You can see it in his content, I guess.
Yeah, and that massive collection of retro consoles he supposedly has. It's not just for show. It's clearly a real passion.
It all feeds into why people connect with him, that authenticity.
Absolutely. And the impact is undeniable. Millions of views per video, huge following, especially with younger audiences, teenagers.
Plus books as well, branching out even further.
Right. He's just a major force in French online culture, particularly around gaming.
So wrapping it up, what's the big picture here?
I mean, his journey really shows how someone can go from just loving retro games to becoming this huge cultural figure.
Right.
Fixing humor, nostalgia, that genuine passion. It clearly worked. And expanding into different formats, charity, even a physical business.
It's quite the arc.
Definitely.
Okay, so quick recap. Frédéric Mola, Jour de Grenier, started with retro game reviews, massive online success, branched out into different shows, charity work, conventions, even opened a bar. A huge influence.
Pretty much nails it.
So here's a thought to leave you with. Considering his focus on preserving and, celebrating retro games, but also now creating this real-world space with Arcadia, what does that suggest about how online communities and real-life experiences are connecting these days, especially for people deep into niche interests?
That's interesting. The line is definitely blurring.
Something to chew on. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.
Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're digging into something a bit different. A 1972 children's cookbook called Le Castor Junior présente les bonnes recettes de Grand-mère Donald.
That translates to Junior Woodchucks present Grandma Duck's good recipes.
Exactly. And our plan isn't just to, review the recipes themselves.
Right. We want to see what this book tells us about, 1972. The culture, the attitudes, that sort of thing.
And straight off the bat, there was something pretty surprising, wasn't there?
Oh, yeah. The reviewer we looked at immediately flagged the amount of alcohol in there. I mean, actual alcohol in recipes meant for kids.
It's quite striking. Things like liqueur and fruit salad, even eau de vie and an orangeade, although that one did have a note.
Yeah, only for adults in small doses.
Still, it appearing in a children's book at all says something, doesn't it, about maybe how differently alcohol was viewed in a family context back then.
It certainly does. A real eyebrow raiser today. But that wasn't the only difficult content, was it? No, definitely not. The reviewer describes some of the imagery as, and I quote, mega racist to modernize.
Yeah, specifically mentioning illustrations of ducks clearly meant to represent Asian people, complete with stereotypical Chinese hats.
It's pretty jarring. A reminder of how accepted certain stereotypes were, even in stuff aimed at children.
Definitely. Okay, so moving past that,
Yeah.
what about the actual recipes and the educational angle?
Well, the recipes themselves apparently weren't, earth-shattering. Pretty standard fare, mostly.
Uh-huh.
But the reviewer did give the book some credit for trying to weave in historical facts for kids.
Oh, right, like the bit about bees being important.
Exactly. That and the origins of sugarcane. It was an attempt to make it more than just cooking instructions, which is, well, kind of neat.
There was a but, wasn't there, about the accuracy?
Ah, yes. The accuracy seemed a bit iffy. The reviewer highlighted one example where the book credits someone called Anastace Collin for making tin cans transportable.
Okay.
Problem is, a quick search turned up, well, nothing. No record of this person.
Huh. So it makes you wonder about the other facts sprinkled throughout, maybe not thoroughly researched.
It certainly suggests that maybe factual precision wasn't the absolute top priority, perhaps more about the anecdote, the story.
And speaking of recipes, even if they weren't revolutionaries, some combinations sounded interesting, or maybe just odd.
Definitely odd by today's standards, perhaps. There was salad sarrasine,
Mm-hmm.
rice, tuna, anchovies.
Anchovies. The reviewer suggested leaving those out, thankfully.
Yes. And another dish, front léger, was described as potentially tasting earthy, disgusting. Doesn't sound
Not
bad.
exactly making my mouth water. It shows how tastes change, right?
Absolutely.
Hmm.
And the reviewer also picked up on this theme, almost an ode to excess, mentioning how the book highlighted occasions with huge amounts of food.
Like that wedding cake fact later.
Exactly, that kind of cultural fascination with big celebratory feasts.
And the instructions themselves, the golden rules, they sounded pretty dated too.
Very much so. Things like, ask for the authorization and collaboration of your mother. Very specific and very telling of the gender roles assumed back then.
Right. Assumes mom's the one in the kitchen you need permission from.
But interestingly, amidst all that, the reviewer did spot some potential for vegan or vegetarian adaptations.
Oh, really? Like what?
Well, there was a ratatouille, naturally, and mace cote d'azur, a corn salad. That would be vegan if you just left out the sausages mentioned.
Okay, so some accidental veggie friendliness.
Even a fancy-sounding Louis XIV dish was nearly vegan, apparently, just tripped up by gelatin. So plant-based wasn't totally off the radar, it seems.
It's such a mixed bag. One thing the reviewer really stressed, though, was the visuals. Or rather, the lack of them.
Yes. A big point was that there were no pictures of the finished dishes. Apparently, it made it really hard to visualize what you were supposed to be making.
You really need pictures in a cookbook, don't you? Especially for kids.
Definitely helps. It underlines how important visuals are. And speaking of accuracy, again, there was that misattributed quote, too.
Oh, yeah, the Racine passera comme le café thing.
Yeah.
Attributed to Madame de Sévigné.
But apparently incorrectly. Just another little sign of maybe a slightly casual approach to the facts.
And then the final factoid, the big one.
The wedding cake. Mentioning the 1971 world record, a cake weighing as much as an elephant, which is quite the image.
Though I imagine that record's been smashed several times since 1971.
Oh, I'm sure. So wrapping it all up, the takeaway seems to be that this book, well, it's not exactly a must-have for recipes.
Right. It's more valuable as a kind of time capsule, wouldn't you say? An accidental historical document.
Precisely. It gives you this unfiltered glimpse into 1972. The assumptions, the cultural quirks, the questionable info, the whole package, really, disguised as a kid's cookbook.
So it makes you think, doesn't it? If this seemingly innocent grandma duck cookbook holds all these layers when we look back, what other everyday cultural things from the past might tell surprising, maybe even uncomfortable stories if we examine them closely today? Something for you to ponder. Thanks for joining our deep dive. Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're digging into the economic world of Russian peasants, late 19th century.
That's right. And we're using a specific lens, Lenin's take on V.Y. Postnikov's study of farming down in South Russia.
Yeah, the sources are mostly these Zemsto statistical surveys, basically local government data crunching from places like Taurida, Kherson.
Yeah, Katerinoslav. Really detailed stuff, actually.
And our goal, our mission, is to see past the averages, understand the diversity, the economic splits, and maybe the very beginnings of capitalism in the countryside through this data.
Right. Because Postnikov, you're straight off the bat, he saw that this idea of peasants being all the same, it just wasn't true.
It didn't hold up to the numbers.
Not at all. He found huge economic gaps, within the very same villages,
Yeah.
using average figures. It completely hid the real struggles and successes.
And Lenin agreed with that finding.
Strongly. He saw this internal division, this heterogeneity, as absolutely critical, politically and economically significant.
So let's look at that Torita data. They grouped peasants by how much land they actually farmed, right? From nothing.
Up to over 50 desiatines.
Mhm.
And remember, a desiatine is nearly 3 acres, so that's a massive range.
Huge range. And the type of land they held their own allotment. Bought land, rented land that varied a lot too.
Enormously. The wealthier peasants were gathering more land, buying it, renting more.
Ah, the renting. That's interesting. Wealthier peasants renting more land.
Yeah, often for business, for commercial farming.
Hmm.
While the poorer peasants,
Uh,
well, they often had to rent out their own small plots.
why? Just couldn't farm it.
Exactly. They lacked the basics, draft animals,
Mhm.
tools. It points right to this emerging stratification, this economic ladder, or maybe chasm.
So this lack of resources, it directly hit their farming output.
Oh, absolutely. Postnikov found productivity shot up with farm size, especially with machinery. Bigger farms just work better.
More efficient, you mean?
Yeah, less labor needed per unit of land. Fewer animals, too, which then leads to the bigger farms hiring workers.
While the poorest peasants, lacking land and tools, had no choice but to sell their labor.
Precisely. You see the split deepening. 2 different paths emerging.
It really sounds like it. Did the data show this in terms of, like, cash income, too?
Looking at the market area, how much they sold versus consumed, the larger farms were far more commercial.
And the smaller ones?
Often operating at a loss, actually, if you only
Mhm.
count farm income. They absolutely depended on wages earned elsewhere just to get by.
Yeah.
Farms under 10 desiatines.
So it's more than just having more stuff. It's a fundamentally different kind of farming, right?
That's what Lenin emphasized. It wasn't just diversity. It was becoming economic strife, exploitation even, subsistence versus commercial, accumulation versus, well, becoming a laborer.
Okay. Now, Postnikov himself, he tried classifying peasants differently, didn't he? By animals owned.
He did, yeah, by draft animals and farm independence. But Lenin argued, quite strongly, that using the cultivated area, the categories the Zemstvo stats already used, was much clearer.
Made more sense with the available data.
Exactly. It lined up better and gave a sharper picture of economic status. That's how you get these useful categories. Poor, middle, and well-to-do cultivators based purely on land under crops.
Let's break that down. The poor, the bottom 40%, what was their reality?
Grim, mostly. Often 0 draft animals, hardly any implements. Independent farming. Out of the question for many.
So they'd rent out their little plot of land.
Often, yes. Which sounds okay, but it was really a sign of decline, of desperation. Their main income source had to be wages. They were becoming essentially a rural proletariat.
A rural working class, wow. And the middle group, that was another big chunk, right? Another 40%.
Yep, around 10 to 25 desiatines. On paper, maybe looking self-sufficient on average.
But averages hide things, as we said.
Exactly. Many in this group still lacked enough animals or tools. They might have to, team up with neighbors, yoking, or find work off the farm. They were really vulnerable. One bad harvest.
Precarious.
Very. Not a stable position for many.
Okay. So pulling this all together from the data and Lenin's analysis, what's the big takeaway?
I think it's the undeniable evidence of deep growing economic splits. It wasn't just slight differences. It was the formation of distinct economic groups, almost classes, with opposing interests.
Really challenges that simple picture of the peasantry.
Completely. And it shows these capitalist relationships, wage labor, commercial farming, dispossession developing right there in the countryside, much earlier perhaps than some thought.
It's a fascinatingly detailed snapshot. Looking at this picture from over a century ago, it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What echoes of these kinds of economic divisions, these dependencies between those with resources and those without, might we still see in farming communities today? Maybe in different clothes, but still there. Something to think about. Thanks for exploring this.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're jumping into game programming, all thanks to this really handy game development cheat sheet we found.
Exactly. No dense textbooks today. We're aiming for a clear, practical look at what game programmers actually do and, how you might even get started yourself.
Okay, let's dig in. So this cheat sheet, it starts by saying programmers are kind of the architects behind the game. They build the core systems.
Yeah, the engine itself, the tools other devs use, the UI, what you actually see and interact with, and the AI that controls characters.
But game programmer isn't just one thing, is it? The sheet stresses it's like a really varied role.
Oh, definitely. It takes sharp logic, for sure. Lots
Yeah.
of problem solving. But also, really good communication skills are key, working with artists, designers, and yeah, math helps too.
The cheat sheet gives some cool examples of programmers who've really made a mark, people like Korean Yu, Quake 2, Halo 4.
Right, pushing visual tech. And then you've got Eric Barone, the Stardew Valley guy,
Yeah.
solo developer, shows the sheer breadth possible.
And Ennis McKendrick for No Man's Sky's procedural stuff, and a Kipnis on Psychonauts. It really grounds the role.
And these folks, they often specialize, right? The cheat sheet calls them party roles, which is kind of fun. You've got gameplay programmers.
Focusing on how the game feels and plays.
Exactly. Then AI programmers making characters smart, or seem smart anyway. UI programmers for menus, engine programmers working deep under the hood.
Network, graphics, sound, tools programmers. It's a whole ecosystem, isn't it?
Totally collaborative. Which brings us to skills. The cheat sheet highlights a few essentials. Math, obviously.
Basic algebra seems pretty standard, maybe some calculus for the more complex stuff.
Yeah, calculus can pop up, but honestly, the core is logic. Breaking down problems, seeing different solutions in your head.
And communication again. You mentioned working with artists and designers.
Crucial. You've got to translate technical stuff clearly and understand their needs too. It's constant back and forth.
Makes sense. Okay, what about the tools? What does the cheat sheet recommend getting familiar with?
Well, for writing code, there's Microsoft Visual Studio that's free, and Xcode, if you're on a Mac, also free.
Nice. And for managing code in a team, source control.
Yep. Tortoise SVN is a free option. Perforce is common in studios, though it's paid. Think of it like track changes for code, but way more powerful.
Gotcha. And the big engines.
Unity and Unreal Engine are the main ones mentioned. Both have free starting points, which is great for learning.
And kind of surprisingly, it recommends a physical notebook.
Huh. Yeah, sometimes you just need to sketch things out, step away from the screen. It actually works.
I can see that. So for someone wanting to dive in, what are the first steps, the quick start quests?
Good one. It suggests recreating old school games. Think Snake or Space Invaders.
Oh, cool. So you learn the fundamentals in a fun context.
Exactly. You're solving actual game problems right away. Plus, there are sites like Code and Game with programming challenges.
And languages. Where should you start?
C++ and C# are the big industry standards mentioned first. Definitely key. But Python, JavaScript, Lua, they pop up too, depending on the engine or task.
So C++ or C# first, then maybe branch out.
That's generally a solid plan, yeah.
What about deeper learning? Any recommended reading? Tomes of knowledge, the sheet calls them.
It points to Game Engine Architecture by Jason Gregory, a classic for understanding how engines are built, and Introduction to Algorithms by Corman and others. More theoretical but fundamental computer science stuff that underpins a lot of programming.
So wrapping this up, looking at this cheat sheet, it's clear game programming is, well, pretty multifaceted. It's technical, logical, but also really collaborative.
Absolutely. And there are so many different paths within programming depending on what interests you, plus lots of free tools to just start experimenting.
It feels more accessible than maybe people think.
Definitely. Which leads to a final thought for you, the listener. Considering all these specializations we talked about, AI, graphics, engine tech, UI, and how fast games are evolving,
Yeah.
what emerging programming role, maybe one we haven't even properly defined yet, do you think will be the most critical for the future of game development, something to chew on?
Okay, let's dive into this fascinating visual you've shared. It's quite something, a single page mapping out human progress.
It really is. You've got everything from agriculture and health right alongside, naval power and military units, all across these huge historical periods.
Exactly. And our goal today really is to just unpack it, see what surprising connections or patterns jump out when you see it all laid out together like this.
Yeah, because the layout itself is interesting. It sort of invites you to look for those links, doesn't it? Things you might not normally connect.
Like you were saying, the timing of universities appearing seems to coincide with more advanced sailing technology.
Precisely. It makes you wonder, was there a shared need driving both? Or maybe some kind of mutual influence? That's the kind of question this setup prompts.
Definitely. And the structure, it's all organized by these epochs, isn't it? From prehistoric all the way to nano.
Right. And there's even that little box, the advancing epochs one.
Yeah, I saw that. It mentions needing to build 2 buildings and spend resources to advance. That's a really neat way to think about societal investment,
It's a great metaphor, I think. It speaks to that cumulative effort, the sheer buildup of knowledge, infrastructure, everything that's needed to move from one age to the next, like, say, bronze to iron.
Okay, so shifting gears a bit, let's look at the military side, because the detail there is pretty incredible.
Oh, absolutely. It tracks specific unit types, infantry, cavalry, siege engines, and how they evolve over time into things like aircraft and tanks.
Take the Navy, for example. You see it go from a simple transport raft, basically, way up to this futuristic Leviathan.
That's a massive technological journey right there on the page, from copper and bronze tools right through to atomic and digital eras represented in those units.
But what's also interesting is how some things persist, like infantry, marked with an asterisk.
Yes. That's fascinating, isn't it? Infantry appears across almost all the land-based epochs. It suggests that despite all the technological change, the fundamental need for ground troops, well, it just stays.
And then you have these unit relationship diagrams. They feel a bit like rock, paper, scissors.
Kinda, yeah. Especially in the early land warfare diagram, it shows shock units beating Pierce, Pierce beating Arrow, and Arrow, in turn, beating Shock. Classic battlefield dynamic.
So how does that change? How do those core relationships get disrupted when something new comes along, say an anti-tank gun?
Well, that's exactly it. New technology forces a shift. Suddenly, there's a direct counter to a previously dominant unit, and tactics, unit mixes, everything has to adapt. It changes the whole strategic calculation.
It's interesting, too, that while there aren't direct lines drawn between, say, religion or economics and the military stuff.
Right, no explicit arrows connecting those columns.
They're all progressing through the same epoch simultaneously. It makes you think about the wider societal context.
Exactly. Are there broader currents influencing everything at once? You see the hospital, for instance, appearing in the imperial era.
What does that signal? What kind of societal organization or medical knowledge had to be in place for that to become a standard building, so to speak?
Good question. And you also see specific figures dotted through the timeline, like Sargon of Akkad or Elizabeth I.
Right. These weren't just abstract trends. Individuals were leading and living within these evolving frameworks.
Then, completely separate from the historical epochs, you have this cyber powers section.
Yeah, that feels distinct. Units like Pandora, Hyperion, Minotaur, all under this all cybers category.
It really stands apart, doesn't it? Almost like a different kind of domain.
So what does that suggest? Is this the future trajectory or something else entirely?
Well, that's the big question it raises, I think. How do we categorize these future or maybe present advancements? Are they just the next step, a continuation? Or are we looking at a fundamentally new paradigm with its own rules, its own dynamics?
So when you step back and look at this whole visual, the main takeaway for me is that progress isn't linear, and it's certainly not isolated, right?
Absolutely. Development in one area, like that stronger Navy we mentioned, could be deeply intertwined with economic shifts or educational advancements or even religious ideas. You can't really silo them.
It's a reminder that everything's sort of connected, pushing and pulling on everything else.
And if you connect that to the bigger picture, it really prompts you to consider what the fundamental engines of change are across all human activity. And it makes you wonder, what might those next big paradigms look like? The ones that don't fit neatly into our current historical boxes.
So here's something for you listening to think about. In whatever field you're interested in today, what are the crucial buildings and resources needed to advance to the next epoch?
And maybe what are the modern equivalents of those foundational units, those basic infantry types in our complex world? What are the core elements that endure, even as everything else changes?
Okay, so for this deep dive, we're jumping into something pretty unique. Moonrise. It's a symphonic metal opera.
Right, and it's based on a story from My Little Pony. Friendship is magic, believe it or not.
Exactly. I've got the libretto, the lyrics, basically, and the credits. Our goal is, to really unpack the story and its themes.
And the team behind it is interesting. Music by the L Train, lyrics by Skybolt. Vocals are key here, too.
Yeah, Secret Metal does the storyteller part, and Avrankova is Princess Celestia.
And Hey Elizabeth does both Princess Luna and Nightmare Moon, plus a bunch of guest guitars pop up.
It's just a fascinating mix, isn't it? Symphonic metal, that huge orchestral metal sound with My Little Pony.
Definitely unexpected. So where does it start?
Well, the prelude. And it kicks off with this surprisingly heavy, almost church-like vibe. Latin phrases, Dies Irae, Dies Umbra.
Day of wrath, day of shadow, wow.
Yeah. But then it shifts, builds into this big praise for Celestia. Gloria, Gloria, in excelsis Celestia.
So right away, you've got that contrast. Darkness and light sort of put right next to each other. Sets the stage.
Totally. Then comes scene 2, harmony. Introduces the two sisters, Celestia for the day, Luna for the night.
Ruling together, right, over a peaceful land.
Mm-hmm. The storyteller really emphasizes they share the power, calls it a heavenly waltz of the sky. It's all about unity.
And there's an instrumental bit here, too.
Yeah, a break with guitar solos from Lucas Linder and the L Train himself. It really tries to musically capture that balance, that harmony they're talking about.
It's crucial they establish that first, the ideal state before things go wrong, day and night working together.
Exactly, because things do go wrong. Scene 3, nightfall.
Here it comes.
Yeah, Linda starts feeling overlooked. The lyrics literally say Her Majesty ignored.
Oof, this gotta sting.
And it plants this wicked seed in her heart, is how they put it. It grows until she transforms into Nightmare Moon.
Rejecting Celestia, rejecting the day.
Mm-hmm. She basically declares it's nighttime forever, the rise of the lunar throne. It's a real turning point.
That feeling of being ignored, being undervalued, it's powerful stuff. You can see how that bitterness could fester, right?
Absolutely. Which leads right into Lunar March. Nightmare Moon is fully defiant now.
What's her angle here?
She's demanding recognition for the night, asking why everyone fears her or prefers the day. She wants darkness to take over. It's kind of a dark power anthem.
So she's not just evil for evil's sake. She feels wronged, like her domain isn't getting its due respect. It adds a layer, doesn't it?
It really does. Then we get an instrumental track, Battle of Sun and Moon.
Okay, so the actual fight between the sisters. Makes sense to do it instrumentally, maybe let the music convey the chaos.
I think so. It ramps up the intensity. After that, scene 6, daybreak.
The aftermath.
Yeah. The moon sets, the castle's in ruins. It sounds pretty bleak. Celestia's mourning Luna.
But the title is Daybreak, so there's a hint of hope.
Exactly. The sunrise signals a chance to rebuild, to find harmony again, even after all that destruction.
That cycle of conflict and potential renewal.
Mm-hmm. And finally, harmony restored.
So how do they wrap it up?
Well, Nightmare Moon is defeated, imprisoned, but Celestia doesn't just, celebrate. She calls for forgiveness.
Interesting. Even after the battle.
Yeah, she talks about a bright future led by love, and the storyteller comes back in with the moral.
Oh, what's the takeaway message?
Basically that abandoned hearts cause sadness, and kindness is the key to keeping harmony. Don't let people feel ignored, essentially. The final chorus brings back the sunrise theme, Hope, harmony restored. And another guitar solo, Gato Paint this time.
So it ends not just on victory, but on reconciliation, or at least the hope for it. And that explicit moral about empathy, it's pretty direct.
It really is. So wrapping up this whole deep dive into Moonrise, it's a story about needing to feel seen, about how isolation can really twist things.
Uh-huh. And how forgiveness is maybe the only way back.
Right. And putting that story into this, epic symphonic metal framework just makes those themes feel huge, almost larger than life.
It really works surprisingly well. It makes you think, though.
Yeah.
This idea of balance, between day and night here, or just different perspectives in general.
Yeah.
How easily does that balance get thrown off when one side feels completely ignored or devalued? What does it take, maybe drawing from this story, to actively listen and maintain that harmony before things escalate? Something to chew on. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're digging into something called My Little Pony Super Ethical Shipping Climax. Bit of a mouthful, right? MLP SESC for short.
Definitely. We've got a report looking at this fan-made visual novel and its creator, someone known as Careful.
So our mission really is to figure out what this game is all about and kind of see where it fits into the whole My Little Pony fandom.
Yeah.
Especially this idea of shipping.
Right. And MLP SESC, it's basically this downloadable interactive story, a visual novel.
Okay.
And it's all centered on shipping, which, in fandom terms means wanting characters together romantically.
Yeah. Ah, okay. Pairing people up.
Exactly. The game itself is described as SFW-ish, sort of a parody.
SFW-ish. So safe for work-ish?
Kind of. Think PG to maybe M-rated standards. It's got sexual references, humor, that kind of thing, but nothing graphic or explicit.
More playful, less serious.
Totally. And it really leans into nostalgia. It's set way back in the early Friendship is Magic era.
Oh, yeah. When
Twilight Sparkle before she got wings. The Cutie Mark Crusaders didn't have their cutie marks yet. Discord was the big bad guy initially.
Ah, okay. So it's meant to feel really familiar for longtime fans.
Definitely the goal.
Right.
And content-wise, it's pretty substantial for a fan game. The final version has, get this, 87 endings.
87.
Yeah, which is about 20% more than the demo had. Plus, it includes this English version, which sounds like it's just for laughs, playing on language.
Ah, when did this come up?
July 7th, 2019.
Mm-hmm.
And it was released for, well, pretty much everything. Windows, Mac OS, Linux, even Android eventually.
Wow. Made with accessible tools, too, it looks like.
RenPy.
Uh-huh. RenPy for the visual novel engine, GIMP and Inkscape for graphics. These are, often free or open source.
Makes sense. And accessible in other ways, too. Subtitles.
Yeah, subtitles. And even designed to be blind-friendly. Plus, the code's under an MIT license. Assets are Creative Commons. It's really open.
And quick to play through. Seems like it. Short average playtime, just a few minutes per run, probably to encourage finding all those endings. Available in English and French.
Okay, let's talk about the creator, Careful.
Right. So Careful describes themselves as just a guy wanting to make the world a better place. They're French, living in Canada since their 20s, uses any pronouns, and identifies with a goofy lion-unicorn hybrid persona. That's very specific.
That's definitely a unique online identity. Fits the fandom space, maybe.
Absolutely. They have an SFW Twitter, sometimes posts in French, joined back in 2013, follows the official MLP account, seems plugged into the community.
And is this their only big project?
Seems like it, at least publicly.
Yeah.
Their itch.io profile mainly just lists this game, MLP SESC. They did tweet about the Android release back in August 2021.
Gotcha. So how did people react to the game? Was it well received?
Generally, yeah, really positive. It's got 4.5 out of 5 stars on itch.io, though that's from only 6 ratings, so small sample size.
For the comments.
Comments are good. Things like cute, wholesome, and meta. I love this sentence, don't judge me. Interesting. One person said their sister would love it.
Any less positive, or just weird?
There was one ambiguous sheesh, and someone mentioned being banned, potentially for jokes. Hard to say what that means exactly, but someone did suggest the Android release in the comments, which later happened.
So the creator listened to feedback. What about wider community buzz?
Yeah, it popped up on the My Little Pony subreddit, Mermy Little Pony, in a discussion about visual novel resources.
Okay.
And Equestria Daily, which is a huge MLP news site, they announced the final version's release. They highlighted the scale, like 15,000 words, loads of images, those 87 endings, and they definitely mentioned the parody aspect in the English version.
What was the reaction there?
Also pretty positive. People in comments were talking about trying to find all the endings. One user even said they peeked at the code to figure it out.
Huh. That's dedication.
It really shows engagement, right? It also got listed on like a Russia Linux forum, among other MLP things. And there's at least one YouTube video review out there.
Okay, so let's circle back to shipping. It seems like a really core part of this game and the fandom itself.
Oh, absolutely massive.
Yeah.
If you look at sites like Derpy which is a big MLP image board, the ship tags are extensive. Ship.twittrash, ship.larabon, tons of pairings.
And it's not just pairing canon characters.
No, fans discuss all sorts. Ethics of shipping yourself with a pony, shipping OC's original characters with canon ones. Equestria Daily and Derpy host discussions about current ships, even next-gen shipping involving hypothetical kids of characters.
Wow. Okay, so MLP SESC taps right into that major fan activity.
Exactly. It's playing within that established fan culture.
And it's not the only fan-made visual novel out there, right? You mentioned resources.
Not at all. There's a huge community around MLP fan VNs. That Reddit thread I mentioned linked to several, including SESC. Itch.io hosts tons of them.
What kinds of things are people making?
All sorts. Some use AI-generated stuff. There are crossovers, adaptations of popular fanfics, like there's a My Little Dashie visual novel, which is based on a famous, quite emotional fanfic, even adaptations of classic stories, but with ponies.
So it's a really vibrant, creative scene.
Totally. There was even a Reddit post attempting a comprehensive overview of MLP fan VNs. It's a whole subgenre.
Okay, so let's try to wrap this up. MLP SESC is this, humorous, pretty self-aware visual novel diving into MLP shipping.
Right. Made by a creator, Careful, who seems genuinely part of that fandom culture.
And the positive reception, the discussions, people hunting for endings, it all shows the game really struck a chord with fans.
Yeah, this whole deep dive, I think, really highlights just how important shipping and fan-created stuff like this are. They genuinely shape the My Little Pony community, give people ways to be creative and connect.
It's fascinating. So here's a final thought for you listening. We've seen this really specific creative output, a visual novel about shipping flourish in the MLP fandom. What other maybe unexpected forms of fan expression might be bubbling up in online communities you're part of? And, what could those tell you about what those groups really care about?
Something to think about.
Definitely. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us. Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're digging into winter in Niigata Prefecture, Japan.
Yeah, we've got this interesting source material, basically an old newsletter from the Niigata International Association back in winter 2016.
Right. And our mission really is to pull out the best bits for anyone curious about what a Niigata winter is actually like.
And the first thing that jumps out, honestly, is the snow. The newsletter says significantly more than other areas. It's clearly a big deal there.
A really big deal. They've even got this mascot, Mr. Lurch, or Raruhi-san. Seems like he's everywhere.
Which is pretty cool because he's not just like a random cartoon.
Right.
He's tied to this real guy, Theodor Edler von Lurch.
Oh, yeah. Who was he?
An Austro-Hungarian military attaché, actually. He gave Japan its very first ski lesson right there in Niigata back in 1911.
Wow, 1911. So like over a century ago. That's some history.
Exactly. And they really embrace it. Rui-san's at events, on merch.
Right.
He even has his own festival.
The Varui site, yeah, mentioned in Jetsu, it kind of makes you think, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Celebrating someone from that long ago so enthusiastically.
Definitely speaks to the local identity.
Okay, so beyond the history and the mascot, how can you, our listener, actually get out and, experience this snowy wonderland?
Well, the newsletter points to some great active stuff.
Yeah.
Galeyuzawa is one. Super convenient.
How so?
The train station is literally at the resort. JR Galeyuzawa Station. You step off the train, you're basically there.
Nice. And it's got, 15 trails and an onsen nearby? Sounds perfect for a day trip.
Yeah, exactly. Skiing, then relaxing in a hot spring. Pretty good combo. Open until early May, too, apparently.
And if you want something bigger, more serious skiing or snowboarding?
The Met Naiba is probably your bet. It's actually 2 resorts, Naiba and Kagura, connected. One ticket gets you access to, 51 trails.
51. Okay, that's massive. How do you get there?
Shuttle bus from Echigo Yuzawa Station. Takes a bit longer, maybe 30 minutes to Kagura, 50 to Naiba, but yeah, way more terrain.
Gotcha. But it's not all about seeing down mountains, is it?
No, definitely not. They highlight Echigo Hillside Park, too, which sounds great for maybe families or just different kinds of snow fun.
Like what?
Sledding, dedicated kids' play areas, even a snowshoe course. So, yeah, broader appeal. Get there by bus from Nagaoka Station.
Okay, cool. So, activities covered. What about the cultural side? You mentioned the Rarui side.
Right. The Lurch Festival in Josu, celebrating Von Lurch with fireworks and music. Sounds like a proper local event.
And there's another one, the Yuzawa Snow Festival.
Yeah, that one sounds pretty lively, too. They crown him with Komako, carry portable shrines through the snow, and, yep, more fireworks.
Fireworks seem popular and easy to get to.
Just a quick walk from Echigo Yuzawa Station. Seems like they make these festivals accessible.
Good. And the newsletter lists even more, right? Other resorts, other festivals?
Yeah, a whole bunch. Akakura Kenko, Aikanatara, Nenok Snow Park, and festivals like Echigo Matsude Fuyu Jin,
Yeah.
Sunan Snow Festival. Just shows how much is going on.
But there was one really unique event mentioned, wasn't there? Something with traditional snowshoes.
Oh, yeah. The Kandichi Race World Championship in Agatown.
Kanijiki, those are the old-style snowshoes.
Exactly. Used for centuries to walk on deep snow.
Yeah.
So this race uses them. They have sprints, relays, even an endurance race.
That sounds amazing. A real connection to the past, but in a fun, active way.
Totally. And you could even try making your own kanji ki at a workshop. Plus a snowman festival alongside it. Seems like a whole experience.
Definitely different. Okay, one last thing mentioned was a charity musical.
Right. The Niigata AGA group put on Robin Hood back in 2016. All proceeds went to Habitat for Humanity in the Philippines.
That's really nice. Free entry, donations welcome. Shows a good community spirit.
Yeah, performing all over the prefecture, too. Gyotsu, Niigata City, Seto Island.
So wrapping this up then, winter in Niigata, based on this 2016 snapshot, is, well, it's clearly way more than just cold weather and snowdrifts.
Absolutely. It's active with skiing and unique stuff like the Kanji Ki race. It's cultural with all these festivals celebrating history and the season. And there's a real community element, too.
You've got easy access resorts like Galeyusawa, huge ones like Met Naiba, unique festivals honoring local history, and even these grassroots charity events.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? How something as simple as getting a lot of snow can fundamentally shape a region's culture, its traditions, even its identity.
Yeah. What other stories, maybe surprising ones, are just waiting to be uncovered when you look closely at how people adapt to and even celebrate their natural environment? Makes you wonder. Ever get that feeling like you're playing a strategy game, hit start, and immediately think, uh-oh, what if I'd clicked there instead? What if just one tiny thing went differently in the past?
Absolutely. That what if is powerful. And today we're diving into exactly that with some really fascinating alternate history stories.
Yeah, we've got these scenarios that imagine how just a small nudge, a tiny change, could create worlds completely unlike our own.
Our mission really is to look at these surprising twists, see
Yeah.
how war, politics, even one person's choice could spin history off in a wild new direction.
Okay, let's jump in. First up, company by Luke Bean. Imagine Germany, 17th century, but an assassination attempt on Wallenstein fails.
Right, a major figure. And because he survives, but maybe weakened, Germany doesn't unify. Instead, it fractures, gets carved up and run by these, well, brutal mercenary companies.
And the weird thing is how normal war becomes. It's just the background radiation of life. Everyone's kind of complicit in this company-run system.
There's this bizarre tradition, too, the Lübeck Watch. Sounds serious, right?
Totally. But what is it?
Turns out it's just people chucking stones and yelling insults at the city walls once a year. Almost. Silly.
Huh. But then that somehow foreshadows the actual horrific sack of Lübeck centuries later in this timeline's 1926. Quite a contrast.
Definitely. And you have symbols like the brown banner, which represents the really harsh reality of their rule, a brutal tradition behind that one.
It shows what happens when there's no real central government, I guess. They even held back technology, didn't they? Like machine guns.
Yeah, anything that might upset the company's grip on power. Progress is slow, self-serving.
Then there's this character, the werewolf. Offers a vision of freedom, but it feels off somehow. Not quite right.
It's a flawed alternative, maybe. And there's that incredibly intense moment, the narrator's mother breaking his hand.
Oh. Just to stop him joining the rifles. It reveals this hidden, deep hatred she has for the companies. Powerful stuff.
It really is. Shows how humanity or morality can flicker even in the darkest places. Oh, and those autocycles they get after Lübeck falls, the Bernardini ones.
Yeah. What about them?
They become obsolete almost instantly. Just shows how messy and unpredictable things are.
But then a connection to the outside. The radio. Suddenly the narrator's hearing English broadcasts.
Right, because of leveler refugees, these English radicals ending up in the haunts of cities. A small detail with big consequences for him.
And that first encounter with Ducky Wooler, it's all hostility. But you kind of sense something else might happen there. Maybe people are their own prisoners too.
That's a great point. Okay, let's shift gears. Hairy turtledoves, the more it changes. We're in 1772 Colomesia. It's a borderland, messy borders, different calendars everywhere. Chaos.
Yeah, and the big twist here is religious. Historically, Sabbatai Tsevi's messianic movement fizzled out after he converted to Islam.
But not in this timeline. Here, it somehow kept going, gained real momentum even after the conversion. It completely reshapes the religious landscape.
So you've got this growing panic about Haidamach rioters, but now their fervor is tied to Sabbatai Tsevi.
And the story shows how the Jewish and Catholic communities react really differently to this threat. Very different coping mechanisms.
And they form this militia, right? Real ragtag group, including Yitzhak, the main character, a Jewish cobbler, and his son, armed with, well, whatever they could find.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And the attack comes. The Haidamachs are fueled by this altered devotion to Sabbatai. It's brutal.
Tragic outcome for some characters, like Casimir, and ultimately Yitzhak himself.
Yes. And his final act, reaffirming his own Jewish faith against this force inspired by a Sabbatai who, in this world, remained a messianic figure.
Yeah.
It's a stark contrast to our history. Really powerful.
Definitely hits hard. Okay, last one. A Single Shot by Rod Reese. Brandywine Creek, 1777. Critical moment in the American Revolution.
Yep. British Captain Ferguson sees two horsemen. He has a clear shot, but he's a quote-unquote gentleman. Hesitates. Orders his men not to fire.
But one doesn't listen. Sergeant Hopkins. He takes the shot.
And the target, General George Washington. He's killed.
Wow. Just one ship.
Changes everything. Fast forward to 1978. There's no independent United States. It's the United States of New England, still part of the British Empire.
And the world map is totally different. You've got this British Empire, a European commune, and a Holy Russia. Wildly different power blocks.
And we follow Andy Heinel. He's a fundamentalist Christian trying to assassinate Erich Honecker, the president of the European Commune.
Right, during their big Codependence Day celebrations. His disguise is intense, a Russian Okhrana agent.
Super elaborate, but the twist. Oh, the twist is good.
Tell me.
The guy helping him, Hopkins, isn't who IDOC thinks he is. He's actually MI5, British intelligence.
No way.
Yeah.
So he's manipulating Hidel.
Exactly. Setting him up. The whole assassination plot is designed by MI5 to frame Russia and cause chaos between the commune and the Russians.
And it works.
Perfectly. Honecker's kills, Russia gets the blame, Hopkins gets a promotion. All because Sergeant Hopkins took that shot back in 1777. History completely rewritten by a single bullet.
That's incredible. So we've seen a Germany run by mercenaries, a world reshaped by a surviving messianic movement, and a global map redrawn by one fatal shot.
Yeah, the takeaway from all these is just how much small divergences can matter. Tiny changes, huge, sprawling consequences.
These stories, they're fiction, obviously, but they really make you pause and think about our own world. How much is chance? How much is choice? How fragile is the history we actually live in?
It's not some fixed path, is it? It's this messy, complex thing.
So thinking about all this, what's one event, just one moment in our own history that if you changed it, you think might have had the most unexpected, far-reaching results? Something to chew on, right? Makes you realize the world we know wasn't inevitable at all.
Okay, welcome back to our deep dive. Today we're looking at some really neat materials you've brought in.
Yeah, these are pages related to Playhouse Disney. Specifically, My Friends Tigger and Pooh, and something called the 100-Acre Wood Hint and Hunt.
Right, the hint and hunt. So our goal here, looking at these pages, instructions, cutouts, is basically to figure out, what was this activity?
Exactly. It feels a bit like putting together a puzzle. We've got Piglet, Tigger, Pooh, the characters you'd expect from that specific show.
Yeah, definitely that My Friends Tigger and Pooh look. Very distinct.
And then there are these backgrounds numbered 1, 2, 3, plus instructions.
And looking at those instructions, right away it says have a grown-up cutout. So clearly aimed at younger kids needing help.
Oh, absolutely. Lots of cutting, taping, maybe gluing involved.
Yeah.
Very hands-on.
So let's talk characters first. Piglet, Tigger, Pooh. We mentioned the specific style. That show, it was all about the super sleuths, wasn't it? Problem solving.
Teamwork, friendship, solving mysteries. So an activity like a hint and hunt fits perfectly with that theme,
Yeah, it makes sense. It probably shaped how the whole thing worked.
I think so. It wasn't just find Pooh. It was likely tied into that cooperative sleuthing vibe.
Okay, then the backgrounds. You said numbered 1, 2, 3.
Right. And the instructions tell the grown-up to cut those out too, and then tape them together.
Okay. So you're not just getting little scenes. You're building a bigger picture.
Exactly. Like a panorama of the 100-acre wood. You assemble the setting first. It's quite clever, actually. Helps with motor skills, following steps.
Makes sense. Create the world before you play in it.
Precisely.
But then there's the title. 100-Acre Wood, Hint and Hunt. Hints. A hunt. But looking through these pages, I don't see any hints.
That's the really interesting part, isn't it? There are no clues listed here, nothing specific to find.
Just instructions to build the scene. Cut the characters, cut the backgrounds, tape the backgrounds, then tape or glue the characters onto the scene.
Yeah, very clear assembly steps. Again, emphasizing that adult help for the tricky bits like cutting.
So it really feels like these pages are just phase 1, the preparation.
That seems the most likely explanation. You build the stage, set the scene with Pooh and friends, and then the hunt begins. But the hunt part itself isn't detailed on these particular sheets.
Okay, that makes sense. What else do we see? Oh, lots of branding.
Yes, everywhere. Channel on Disney, the little Playhouse Disney logo with the Mickey ears.
And the website, playhousedisney.com, on basically every page.
Oh.
And the Disney copyright, of course.
It firmly places it in that Playhouse Disney era, which was all about that mix of entertainment and light educational content for preschoolers.
And the repetition is noticeable. Same instructions, same logos on multiple pages.
Which suggests these were probably individual sheets, maybe from a magazine insert or an activity pack you could download or buy. Each sheet stands alone but reinforces the brand.
So if we summarize our little dig here, these materials are essentially a kit to build a My Friends Tigger and Pooh scene.
Yes, the components and the instructions for assembly. It's the setup for the main event, the hint and hunt.
And the key thing for you, listening, is that while we know how to build it, the actual hints or the things to be hunted, they're missing from this set.
It leaves a bit of a mystery. We have the stage, we have the actors, but not the script for the second act.
Which, honestly, Leads to a pretty fun thought to leave you with. Given this scene you've built, with Tigger, Pooh, Piglet in the 100-acre wood, what kind of hints do you think they used?
Yeah, what would you be looking for in that specific setting? Maybe a pot of honey or something related to the super sleuths concept.
It could be anything, really. What objects or details in that world would make for a good hunt for a little kid? Something to think about. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're digging into something really quite cool from gaming history, the Sims 2 Body Shop Manual.
Yeah, it's the standalone tool separate from the main game initially.
Exactly. And our goal here is to unpack how this tool basically let you sculpt your Sims, create them before you even loaded up the Sims 2 proper.
It was like a digital workshop, a preview almost. And it really showed right from the start how much emphasis Max has put on customization for the players, giving you that power.
It really did. And the manual itself, which is our main source here, it breaks it down into two main parts, two modes. First up, you've got Build Sims mode. This is where you craft the whole sim. Ever want to make a sim version of yourself or maybe a friend?
That's the place to do it. You could start totally fresh, maybe hit randomize for some inspiration.
Or just jump right in. Choose the gender, male or female, the age, toddler all the way up to elder.
And body types too, though the manual notes for toddlers, there wasn't really a visual difference at first. But the key thing was seeing it all happen live.
Yeah, that instant feedback in the preview window.
Yeah.
You tweak something, you see it immediately.
Very slick for the time.
And you weren't just limited to starting from scratch, right? You could clone Sims too.
Oh yeah, super useful. Make a sim you like, clone them, then maybe tweak the clone. Great for families or just variations. Creates a totally new sim file.
And getting a good look at your creation was easy too. You could rotate them with buttons or just click and drag. Got to see all the angles.
Essential. And once you've got them positioned, then the real fun begins, the customization.
Okay, let's get into that. Genetics first. Skin tone, eye color, hair. Both the style and the color.
And it's interesting they called it genetics even back then, because those choices, especially eye color, they actually mattered for inheritance in the main Sims 2 game later on, laid the groundwork.
It goes deeper, though. The faces section.
Wow, you could pick a whole face shape or really zoom in.
Right, individual parts, brow, eyes, nose, mouth, jaw. You can sculpt each one.
And then the modifiers, if picking the nose shape wasn't enough. Yeah, you could then adjust the width, the size, tiny little details, like being a digital clay modeler.
Seriously precise.
Yeah.
Then you layer on the finishing touches, makeup, facial hair, glasses. Lots of options there.
Huge range of styles, even back then, really let you define a look.
And clothes, naturally, every day. Formal, undies, PJs, swimwear, athletic. All the categories.
Though the manual points out only one outfit gets saved for that little preview picture in the sim bin.
Oh, right, the sim bin. That's where you save your finished sims within Body Shop itself.
Yep, but the really cool part, I think, was packaging them.
That let you share them, didn't it?
Exactly. It creates a file. You could pop it on a floppy disk. Well, maybe not floppy by then, but, email it, share it with friends who also had Body Shop or The Sims 2.
Building a community around creations. The manual even mentions uploading directly to thesims2.com.
Yeah, though that required registration, might not have been live immediately, but the idea was there. Sharing was key.
Okay, so that's building a whole sim. But what if you wanted to, make your own shirt design or a totally new hair color?
Now you're talking about create parts mode. This was for the real custom content creators, the modders, essentially.
Getting into the nitty-gritty.
Totally. It was project-based. So say you wanted a new t-shirt, that's a project. A new eye color, separate project.
Makes sense. What kind of parts could you create?
Well, the manual lists genetics, so skin tones, eyes, hair again, facial hair, makeup, glasses, and clothing. Pretty comprehensive.
So how did it work? You pick clothing, then maybe t-shirt.
Right. You'd select the specific item you wanted to use as a base. Then the Body Shop would export the texture files for it.
The image files.
Yeah.
Like the pattern.
Exactly. The actual image wrapped around the 3D model. You'd take that file, open it in Photoshop or whatever image editor you use.
Make your changes. Add your design.
Yep. And then this was clever. There was a refresh preview sim button. You didn't have to close your image editor or restart Body Shop. Just hit refresh and see your changes on the sim.
That's handy. Saves a lot of back and forth.
Definitely. You could even add custom descriptions, tooltips that would show up in the main game's Create a Family screen.
Nice touch. And when you were done?
Import to game. That finalized it, made your custom shirt or hair color available in Body Shop in The Sims 2, And you could save your project files, too, to work on them later.
Going back to genetics for a sec, skin tones were complex, right?
Yeah, the manual stresses, they come in sets. You had to have textures for all the ages, genders, body types for it to work properly.
And hair, too, textures needed for toddler through elder, and they were gender specific.
Right. While things like, say, custom glasses or makeup, you could actually choose which genders or age groups could use them. More flexibility there.
And clothing. You could get creative with categories.
Oh, yeah. You could assign your custom item to multiple categories. Want that swimsuit to also be formal wear? Go for it. Underwear as athletic wear. Why not?
The possibilities. So after all that creating, how do you leave?
Simple quit icon? Pretty standard.
And the manual briefly covers system requirements.
Yeah, very basic by today's standards. Windows 98 up to XP, 600 megahertz processor, 256 megs of RAM. Not much space needed.
But an important note, you couldn't run Body Shop and the Sims 2 game at the same time.
Correct. They shared resources, so it was one or the other.
So wrapping up, the Body Shop, as laid out in this manual, was this really surprisingly deep tool. It gave you incredible power to personalize your Sims.
Way beyond just picking presets, you could really craft unique looks and even unique items.
Absolutely. And it kind of makes you ponder, doesn't it? Giving players that much control over virtual appearance, over traits that could even be inherited. What does that mean for the stories we tell, the societies we build in these virtual worlds? And it wasn't just avatar dress-up, it was shaping virtual genetics, the whole fabric of your Sim neighborhood.
A fascinating level of control, really. Sets the stage for a lot.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we've got a really intriguing mix of sources.
Yeah, it's quite the combination. We're looking at some classified intelligence documents alongside a user manual for a computer game.
A computer game. Okay, that's different.
Right. It's called Cinematic System. And it all seems to tie in to something called Operation Stealth.
Operation Stealth. So our mission basically is to figure out what that is and how it connects to a potential theft, maybe of a stealth fighter.
Exactly. The documents introduce us to a CIA agent named John Glames, quite the character. We also get details on the stealth fighter itself, a bunch of spy gadgets.
Like real spy gadgets.
Apparently so. And then two main suspects, a General Manigua in Santa Paragua and the Soviet KGB.
Okay, let's start with John Glames. His profile.
Oh.
It sounds almost made up.
It really does. Described as brilliant from childhood, a top athlete, swimming records, skiing.
West Point grad, knows ninjutsu, and has a master's in chemistry from MIT.
Yeah. Plus expert in weapons, shooting, electronics, likes racing cars. It's a lot. The only listed weakness, women.
Okay, so moving on to the plane, the stealth fighter. What are we talking about tech-wise?
Pretty advanced stuff. Laser-guided bombs, apparently super accurate. Nuclear-capable smart bombs.
Whoa, okay.
Yeah. And speed 3,000 kilometers per hour with a hyper boost option, though that sounds risky fuel-wise. Small tank.
And it can disappear. That OZX thing.
Right, some kind of advanced radar jamming makes it basically invisible to detection, a huge strategic asset.
So the gadgets then, you mentioned gadgets.
Oh yeah, get this. A false attaché case. Inside, there's a calculator.
Okay.
That explodes if it gets separated from the case.
They're kidding?
Nope. And also a hidden NTY forger for making fake passports, French, British, German.
Wow. What else?
There's a watch with a 30-meter cable strong enough to hold a person. A pen.
A pen.
A cutting pen filled with benzoic acid to dissolve metal. Specific instructions for steel, iron, gold. Warns about fumes.
That sounds incredibly dangerous.
Definitely. Also, a razor that's secretly a recorder. A safe-cracking box, supposedly co-invented by a famous burglar.
Seriously?
And a cigarette case. But the cigarettes, some are tiny rockets.
Rocket cigarettes.
Yeah. 25-meter range. Others can reveal fingerprints. It's quite the toolkit.
Okay, so setting the scene, Santa Paragua, General Manigua. What's the story there?
Political turmoil, basically. Manigua was elected, then became a dictator. Our agency used to support him, but switched to backing a resistance group called Libertad.
So now we're his enemy.
Pretty much. And there's this telex message from another agent, DSC-2, hinting Manigua is mixed up in this stealth affair, maybe the theft.
Gotcha. And suspect number 2, the Soviets.
Right, the KGB. Even though relations were maybe improving slightly, there were still hardliners. Plus, their own stealth-type project apparently hit a snag when a key scientist, Professor Lukasiewicz, defected.
So the worry is they'd steal ours to, catch up. Maybe working with Manigua?
That's the theory presented, yeah. a classic Cold War scenario.
But then, the game manual, cinematic system. How does that fit in?
Well, it's bizarre. It just describes how to play this computer game with a mouse. Moving a character, interacting with things, using commands like examine, take, use, act, speak.
Hang on. Examine, take, use. That sounds kind of like...
Like what a spy does, right? Examining clues, taking items, using gadgets, managing an inventory. It's strangely parallel. The manual even has loading instructions for different computers, Amiga, PC.
So what are we thinking here? We've got this intense, high-stakes global situation, an agent who's practically superhuman, amazing tech, plausible enemies.
And then this game manual just lands in the middle of it. Is Operation Stealth just the name of the game? Or maybe the game is reflecting something real, a training tool maybe, or even, disinformation.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? We've got this incredibly advanced aircraft, these almost sci-fi gadgets, a geopolitical powder keg.
And a computer game that seems to mirror it all. It definitely leaves you wondering.
So the final thought maybe is, in a world with increasingly complex tech and secret operations, how easy is it really to tell what's real and what's just a simulation? And what happens when those lines get fuzzy? Ever heard a city called the French Manchester? It really sparks the imagination, doesn't it?
It does. Quite a title.
We're diving into Mulhouse today. It's in Alsace, France, and has this really interesting past. You sent us some great material covering how it went from being independent to this, well, industrial giant.
Yeah, exactly. It had this long history, centuries really, of doing its own thing, even allied with the Swiss for a long time.
Right.
And then, boom, the Industrial Revolution hits, and it gets this whole new identity. So our mission, you could say, is to figure out why that Manchester comparison happened.
And what that tells us about, the bigger picture of its history.
Precisely. Let's maybe start with that independence period. It lasted a while.
Centuries, you said. That's pretty remarkable for a city.
It really is. We're talking from 1308 as a free imperial city, and then linking up with the Swiss Confederation in 1515. So yeah, a very long stretch of self-government, really forged its own character.
Okay, but it didn't last forever. It eventually joins France in 1798. What pushed it in that direction?
Well, you have to look at the map of Europe back then. Bigger states were consolidating power.
Centralization, yeah.
Right. And Mulhouse was in a really strategic spot. As France started pushing its borders eastward, well, Mulhouse became quite attractive.
Location.
Pretty much. So despite its long independence, joining France started to look almost inevitable given the political winds.
I see. And it had a complicated history even after that, didn't it? Back and forth between France and Germany.
Oh, absolutely. Annexed by Germany, then back to France. It really highlights how contested that whole region was.
Okay, let's get to the core of it. The French Manchester. Why that specific comparison? What made Mulhouse so special industrially?
Right. So this is where things really take off. Like Manchester in England, Mulhouse was one of the very first places in France to industrialize, and it did it fast. We're talking mid-18th century.
That early. Wow.
Yeah, families like the Cufflins, they were real pioneers driving this change.
And it was mostly about textiles, wasn't it? That's the classic image.
Exactly. Cotton was king initially. Processing raw cotton, and especially producing these Indians.
Indians, what are those exactly?
They're these brightly printed cotton fabrics, hugely popular at the time. Think intricate designs.
Okay.
And Mulhouse got really good, really fast at making them. They adopted new tech, like copper roller printing allowed for much faster, more detailed printing than before.
A real game changer, I bet.
Totally. And they jumped on steam power early, too, just like Manchester, really mirroring that technological drive.
So they weren't just early adopters. They actually became like a dominant force.
Oh, absolutely. By the mid-1800s, Mulhouse was pretty much the leading textile center on the entire continent, especially known for innovation in dyeing and printing.
Right, pushing the boundaries.
Constantly. And their products, again, like Manchester's, went everywhere. Big domestic market, but also international exports.
That kind of explosive growth must have just completely transformed the city itself.
It really did. Huge economic boom. The city physically expanded rapidly. You mentioned that nickname earlier.
City of 100 chimneys. Yeah.
Gives you a picture, doesn't it? Lots of factories, lots of smoke. Infrastructure had to change massively to cope.
And socially, too, I imagine.
Definitely. You saw the rise of this powerful industrial elite, the bourgeoisie, alongside a really large working class. Very similar social shifts to what happened in Manchester.
It makes you wonder, though, with all that industrial muscle, was there any chance Mulhouse could have, stayed independent? avoided being absorbed?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's interesting to think about.
Yeah.
On one hand, yeah, economic power gives you clout. They had skilled workers, trade networks, strategic importance. Maybe that could have bought them some autonomy.
But the downsides must have been huge, too.
Exactly. I mean, look at the scale. Mulhouse was still relatively small, population-wise, compared to
Right.
France or the German states.
Right. Limited manpower.
And the geopolitics were just so intense in that region. Always pressure from bigger neighbors,
Yeah.
plus relying on outside places for raw materials, for markets.
And keeping up technologically, militarily.
Precisely. So while it's a neat idea, the trend towards bigger nation states was just so strong. Long-term independence was probably, well, highly unlikely.
The industrial chapter closed, or at least changed, and it became part of France derivatively.
Yeah.
But that legacy, that Manchester period, it's still central to Mulhouse today.
Oh, absolutely. It's baked into the city's identity. You've got amazing museums there, like the Museum of Printed Textiles, the Musée de l'Impression sur Étoffe.
Ah, okay. Celebrating that history.
Directly. And even just walking around, the architecture tells that story. You see the factories, the worker housing, the grand villas of the owners. It's all there.
So to wrap up then, it's this journey from, centuries of being its own city-state to becoming this absolute powerhouse of industry, earning that French Manchester tag,
A really potent nickname.
and then ultimately being integrated into the larger French nation.
Yeah.
It really captures a huge shift in European history.
It does. That title, French Manchester. It's more than just a catchy phrase. It really signifies its crucial role in the whole Industrial Revolution story on the continent.
It definitely makes you think, doesn't it, how that kind of intense regional economic power could be both a source of strength, maybe even autonomy for a while,
Yeah, double-edged sword sometimes.
but also inevitably attracts the attention and maybe the control of bigger national players. You have to wonder, are there echoes of that dynamic playing out even today in different contexts? Something for you, the listener, to maybe chew on. Ever feel like there are just too many choices? Even when, they're supposed to make things simpler. Well, today we're diving into something with a lot of choice. These different versions of Ubuntu Linux. They call them flavors.
Right. And our mission, really, is to unpack the key differences. We want to help you figure out which one might actually be the best fit for you.
Yeah, depending on what you need, right? Or even how old your computer is.
Exactly. We've been digging into stuff from the Ubuntu Wiki, ZDNet, some other tech sources, just to get a good handle on it.
Okay, so let's get into it. One of the big things, maybe the biggest thing, is the desktop environment.
Definitely. That's basically how everything looks and feels, how you interact with the system.
Like the user interface, the whole vibe. And it really affects performance too, doesn't it?
Yeah.
How much power it needs from your machine.
Absolutely. Now, it's important to remember, they all share that same core Ubuntu foundation. They run the same software underneath.
Solid base.
Solid base. But yeah, that desktop environment, maybe some pre-installed software that gives each flavor its own personality.
So choosing one isn't just technical, it's kind of personal too. Depends on your hardware, your habits.
Precisely. What feels comfortable, what works for the tasks you do most often.
Okay, let's get specific then. Lubuntu, there's the story there. It uses LXQT mostly now, right?
Yeah, LXQT, it used to be LXDE. The key thing here is lightweight. Super lightweight.
So perfect for older computers.
Yeah.
Like breathing new life into them.
That's the main goal, yeah. We're talking machines that might struggle with, say, the default Ubuntu. Lubuntu can make them feel surprisingly usable again.
And I saw something interesting. They're planning a move, eventually, to MIRIWay for Wayland, even on this lightweight version.
That's the plan for 25.10, yeah. It shows they're looking ahead, trying to bring modern display tech even to systems focused on older hardware. It's about future-proofing, kind of.
Right, interesting. Okay, what about Ubuntu Studio? Sounds pretty specific.
It is. It's geared towards creatives. Think musicians, video editors, graphic designers, that sort of thing.
So it comes loaded with useful tools for them.
Exactly. Audio workstations, video editors, graphic software, it's all pre-installed. Uses the X-Race desktop, which is known for being pretty stable and not too resource-hungry itself.
Saves a lot of setup time, I bet.
Definitely. It understands that creative workflow, Gets you started faster.
Cool. Then there's Ubuntu Kylin. That one seems quite targeted, too.
Very targeted. It's aimed primarily at Mandarin-speaking users.
Oh.
The interface UKUI is designed to feel a bit familiar, maybe like Windows 7 for some folks, and it comes with WPS Office, which has good compatibility with Microsoft Office docs.
Makes sense. Accessibility is key there. What about Ubuntu Cinnamon? Sounds comfortable.
That's a good word for it. The Cinnamon desktop is often seen as a really smooth transition for people coming over from Windows. It has that familiar layout, taskbar at the bottom, start menu.
So less of a learning curve, maybe.
Potentially, yeah, if
Yeah.
you like that traditional desktop feel.
Okay, Kubuntu next. KDE Plasma Desktop.
Right. KDE is known for being incredibly customizable. Like, you can tweak almost everything.
Oh, wow.
It also has a somewhat Windows-like feel, but maybe a bit more modern looking out of the box than Cinnamon sometimes.
Any downsides?
Well, all that power and customizability means it can be a little heavier on resources compared to, say, Lubuntu or XV.
Gotcha. And it's using Wayland by default now, too, in 25.04.
Yep, that's the default. Shows KDE Plasma is really pushing forward with modern tech.
And that brings us to the main one, just default Ubuntu. GNOA Desktop.
That's the one. GNOME is very modern, quite different visually from, say, Cinnamon or KDE's default. It focuses on simplicity, maybe a bit more like Mac OS in some ways, conceptually.
Good for beginners, or just general use.
Yeah, often recommended for both. It's user-friendly, looks good, and gets regular updates. And like Kubuntu, it defaults to Wayland.
So lots of choices there, and we haven't even really detailed things like Ubuntu.
Right, Ubuntu uses XV's like Studio, but it's more general purpose, a good balance of speed and features.
Or Ubuntu MyKey.
MyKey gives you that classic, traditional Linux desktop feel, kind of like older GNOME versions. Very solid.
Ubuntu Budgie.
Budgie aims for elegance, modern look. Some say it has a bit of a macOS vibe too, but it's its own thing. Pretty polished.
Paid Ubuntu for education, obviously.
Tailored for schools. Likely Wayland default in 25.04 too.
And Ubuntu Unity, bringing back that classic Unity interface.
Yeah, for those who really like the efficiency of the Unity shell, especially with keyboard shortcuts.
So many options. You mentioned Wayland and the older one, X11. Can you quickly recap that?
Sure. So the display server is like the graphics coordinator. It manages how applications draw stuff on your screen. X11 is the older, very established system.
Okay.
Wayland is the newer one. It's generally designed to be more efficient, more secure, handles modern graphics features like high-res displays and different refresh rates, maybe a bit better.
So Ubuntu, Kubuntu, and Ubuntu use Wayland.
What about the others? Many others, like Ubuntu, Lubuntu currently, AIM8, Budgie, Studio, Kylan, Cinnamon. They often still default to X11. Sometimes it's stability, sometimes the desktop environment isn't fully ready for Wayland yet, though many are making progress. Lubuntu's planned move shows things are changing.
Right. So it all comes back to the listener, doesn't it? The best flavor. It just depends.
Completely. There's no single right answer. You've got to think about your specific situation.
Like, what hardware are you running? Is it old or new? What do you want it to look like? Do you want simple or tons of options?
And what are you actually doing? Just browsing an email? Or heavy video editing? Or maybe coding?
So think about your own needs. Explore a few, maybe.
Definitely. Most let you try them out from a USB stick without installing.
Which leads to a final thought. If an operating system, this core piece of software, can have so many tailored versions, what other tech could really benefit from that level of user-centric customization? Makes you wonder, you know.
It really does. How much more personal could our technology actually become? Something to think about. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're looking at Veracrypt. It's this free tool for encrypting your stuff.
Right, open source. And it does what's called on-the-fly encryption.
Which basically means it works automatically in the background, yeah, once you set it up.
Exactly. You unlock it, use your files, lock it back up. It encrypts everything, files, file names, even the empty space. Pretty thorough.
So we're diving into the official user guide today, specifically the beginner's tutorial.
Pages 6 to 22. We're pulling out the must-know bits.
And the mission, really, is to get you comfortable creating and using a basic Veracrypt container. That's like a secure file that acts as a virtual drive.
We'll try to keep it clear.
Yeah.
You know, regardless of how techie you feel you are.
Okay, so let's say you've got it downloaded and installed. You fire it up.
First thing you see is the main window. You'll want to click the Create Volume button.
Straightforward enough.
Yep.
Then a wizard pops up.
Yep. And it asks what kind of volume. The guide points beginners towards Create an encrypted file container. That's the default.
So it's making a secure space inside a regular file.
Pretty much. There are other options like encrypting a whole partition or drive, even hidden ones. but let's stick to the container for now. It's simpler to start with.
Got it. Next choice is standard varicrypt volume, also the default.
Right. The hidden volume thing sounds intriguing. Definitely something maybe for later.
Okay, now this part's important. You're creating a new file that holds the encrypted stuff.
Big heads up here from the guide. If you select a file that already exists...
It gets deleted, right? Not encrypted.
Exactly. It becomes a container. Encryption happens inside it. So you click Select File.
Choose a location, maybe your documents or a data drive. Give it a file name like My Secret Stuff.
Remember, this file doesn't exist yet. You type a name, click Save, then Next.
Then you see encryption options, algorithms.
Yeah, AES, SHA 512, stuff like that. The guide says, and I agree, just stick with the defaults for now. They're strong, industry standard.
Makes sense. Click Next.
Now, size. How big do you want this virtual secure drive to be? Let's say 250 megabytes.
You just type that in, click Next.
And here it is, the password step. This is absolutely critical.
Use a strong one. The guide really emphasizes this. You type it twice.
Make sure they match. Otherwise, Next stays grayed out.
Okay, password set, click Next. Then there's this weird mouse moving thing.
Huh, yeah. It seems odd, but moving your mouse randomly helps generate really strong, unpredictable encryption keys.
More random is better for security.
Definitely. Just wiggle it around in the window until that progress bar fills up. The guide suggests about 30 seconds. Make sure it's green.
Then you click Format.
And that's when varicrypt actually creates the container file. And basically scrambles the insides with random data. Click OK when it says it's done.
And exit the wizard. Phew. Container created.
But it's just a file for now. Locked. You can't use it yet.
Right, you need to mount it. So back in the main varicrypt window, you pick a drive letter that's not being used, like M or something.
That letter becomes your secure drive. Then click Select File again.
Find the container file you just made, My Secret Stuff.
Select it. Click Open.
Then in the main window, click the Mount button.
And boom, password prompt. Enter that strong password you set up earlier.
You might see something about a PRF algorithm. Just leave the default. Click OK.
And if the password's right, success, your drive, M or whatever, pops up in File Explorer.
And here's the cool part, the on-the-fly bit. Anything you save to M is automatically encrypted.
And anything you open from M is decrypted automatically, but only in your computer's RAM. Nothing decrypted hits your actual hard drive.
So seamless, you only needed the password to unlock or mount it.
That's the gist. Double-click the drive, use it like normal.
Then when you're done,
Select the drive letter back in varicrypt, click Dismount.
or just restart your computer.
Either way, it locks right back up. Your M drive vanishes, and the files are inaccessible, safe inside the encrypted container.
So that's the basic loop.
Okay.
Create, mount, use, dismount. You've got a secure spot for sensitive files.
It really highlights that on-the-fly aspect. Easy to use when mounted, totally secure when it's not.
Of course, this probably gets you thinking. What about encrypting my whole backup drive? Or using those key files instead of just a password?
Or digging into those hidden volumes we mentioned.
Yeah, exactly. All great questions, potential topics for another deep dive, perhaps?
But for now, just think about that peace of mind. Knowing your data is safe, even if someone gets hold of your laptop or USB drive.
It raises a good point. What other parts of your digital life could use that kind of security and control? Something to mull over. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're digging into an online presence you asked us about, Vexy Vampire.
Yeah, this one's interesting. We've got a bunch of their online profiles, some biographical stuff too.
Exactly. And the mission today is, well, let's try and piece together who Vexy Vampire really is, what drives their online world.
Okay, so diving right in. The name Vexy Vampire, it actually links pretty clearly to a Christina Miliara.
Oh, really? How so?
Through her Pinterest profile.
Yeah.
It literally says, I am a YouTuber.
Yeah.
And uses the Vexy Vampire username.
Right. So, boom, there's the real-world link right away.
Yep. Establishes that connection. And it seems like that Pinterest is sort of a jumping-off point.
Because we see links out to other places.
Exactly. Twitch, YouTube. There are even comments on TikTok under that name. It's all kind of interconnected.
Okay, let's break down those platforms. What did you find on Twitch?
Okay, so on Twitch, the handle is Vexy Vampire. She calls it her sanctuary. Looks like maybe 232 followers. Not really. Last activity seems like maybe 4 months ago. But it does link out to other socials. Yeah. And interestingly, there's a Steam community link showing fan art.
Fan art of what?
Morrigan from the Darkstalkers games.
Yeah.
In a swimsuit. which kind of suggests, maybe fighting games
Mm-hmm.
and perhaps a more mature audience.
Okay, gaming interest noted. What about YouTube?
YouTube channel is Vexy Vampire, linked from that Pinterest. We didn't see the videos directly, but another YouTuber mentioned her channel,
Oh, in what context?
talking about techno and trance music and video games.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that reinforces the gaming theme, adds electronic music to the mix.
Got it. Gaming, music, and TikTok. You said she comments there.
Yeah, seems pretty active as a commenter, actually. And the comments are quite diverse.
Yeah.
Like beautiful do's on Kingdom Hearts fan art.
Okay, more gaming.
Right. Then condolences and manga recommendations on a video about cat manga. So cat's manga.
Huh, okay.
Also comments like, so cute, on a wholesome game video. Seems to appreciate aesthetics.
Yeah.
And interacts with another user at Vexy Vampire Mistress, using hashtags like hashtag kawaii, hashtag otaku, hashtag emo, hashtag gothic girl, hashtag otaku girl, hashtag gamer girl, hashtag Twitch streamer.
Wow, okay. That paints a picture. Definitely an alternative aesthetic vibe, plus the otaku and gamer tags again.
Totally. And that alternative style, the Vexy Vampire name itself, it all ties back really strongly to Pinterest, too.
Right, the profile under Christina Miliara, what kind of boards does she have?
Oh, it's quite a collection. Huge boards. Like Magic has over 300 pins. Vexy Fashion Taste, that's massive, like 540 pins.
Fashion is clearly big then.
Definitely. And drawings over 500 pins there, too. So art is a major interest.
And does it tie into the other themes?
Yeah, you see game room design,
Yeah.
cat room decor, fits with the TikTok comments, and mystical creatures and races.
Okay, so the themes are pretty consistent. Gaming, art, fashion, definitely this alternative or mystical aesthetic.
Yep, that seems to be the core of the Vexy Vampire online world.
But, and this is where it gets kind of wild, Christina Miliara, the name behind Vexy Vampire. Well, she's got this whole other side.
Oh, yeah. This is the surprising part. We found she holds a trademark for mental fit.
Mental fit. Okay. Yeah, what is that?
Well, get this. Dr. Christina Miliara has a PhD in psychology.
Wait, what?
A PhD. Also a master's in marriage and family therapy. And apparently like 20-plus years of experience, relationships, trauma, addictions.
Hold on. A PhD psychologist and therapist with decades of experience is also Vexy Vampire, posting about goth fashion and video games.
It seems so. And there's more. She owns a CrossFit gym in Florida, CrossFit Tailwinds.
No way.
Certified CrossFit Level 2 trainer, USA weightlifting coach.
Yeah.
She really emphasizes that mind-body connection. Developed a mental fit and mindset course with Healthy Steps Nutrition for other gym owners.
So she's deep into fitness and mental wellness professionally.
Deep. Provided mental health support at the CrossFit Games. Appeared on podcasts talking about mental health, self-care. Has a whole professional therapy website too, Coastwide's Mediation and Therapy.
Wow. Okay, that's quite the juxtaposition. The online persona and this highly accomplished professional reality.
It really is. You have this creative, alternative online presence, the gaming, art, fashion stuff, and then this, very serious established career in mental health and physical fitness.
So the big question is, how do these connect? Does her professional life influence the Vexy Vampire side at all?
That's the really fascinating part, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's not explicit, like she's not giving therapy advice on Twitch, obviously. But you have to wonder.
Yeah, like, does that background maybe shape how she builds community online? Or maybe there are subtle hints about well-being we just didn't pick up on initially.
Exactly. It makes you think about the layers, People are complex. The online persona might just be one specific outlet or interest.
Okay, so let's try and summarize this deep dive then. Vexy Vampire is Christina Miliara. Online, she's immersed in gaming, art, alternative fashion, that whole vibe.
Uh-huh. But in the real world, she's Dr. Christina Miliara, a psychologist, therapist, CrossFit owner, coach with, a significant career focused on mental and physical health.
It's a blend of creative online engagement and deep real-world expertise.
Definitely. Which kind of leads us to a final thought for you, the listener. Knowing all this now, how does it change how you might see online personas?
Right. Especially ones that seem maybe niche or focused on one particular thing, like gaming or goth style.
Yeah, does it make you consider the multifaceted person behind the screen more? What other hidden depths or surprising careers might be out there in the online communities you're part of?
It's a good reminder, isn't it? What we see online is often just like one channel on someone's TV. There's usually a whole lot more going on. Welcome to the deep dive. So today we're tackling something lots of you are probably wondering about. Windows users looking at Linux. Is Kubuntu like the ideal choice?
Yeah, it comes up a lot. We've got this report looking right at that how Kubuntu stacks up for someone making the switch.
Exactly. The goal here is, cut through the jargon, give you the clear picture on things like familiarity. Can it run your Android apps? Is it stable? All that stuff.
Right, without getting totally bogged down. This report digs into that whole experience. What hits you first, really, is how Kubuntu tries to make that landing softer.
Let's start there with familiarity. The report really hammers this point, the KDE Plasma Desktop.
Uh-huh.
It mirrors Windows quite a bit, doesn't it? Panel at the bottom, the Start menu, well, the K menu.
Yeah, the K menu, taskbar, system tray, desktop icons, it's all very deliberate.
It sounds like they really thought about making that first hour less jarring.
Absolutely. Like pinning apps to the taskbar that's muscle memory for Windows users. It's just there. Even the login screen apparently has echoes of Windows 11. It's about making things feel intuitive from the get-go.
Okay, so it feels familiar, but it's not just a Windows clone, is it? The report mentions KDE Plasma is super customizable.
Oh, yeah. That's the other side of the coin. You get the familiar starting point, but then you can really tweak almost everything.
Like what kind of things?
Themes, icons, colors, fonts, how the taskbar behaves, window decorations, you name it.
Wow.
Plus widgets, and kind of like the old Windows gadgets and these things called activities for organizing different workspaces. It's powerful.
Sounds like it could almost be too much at first.
It might feel a bit overwhelming initially, yeah.
Yeah.
The report acknowledges that. But long term, that flexibility is a huge plus compared to how locked-down Windows can feel.
Okay, moving on. Big topic, Android apps. The report says Kubuntu 24.04 LTS includes Plasma Wayland, but for testing.
Yeah.
Why is Wayland important here?
Right, so Wayland is the newer system for handling graphics display. Think of it as the plumbing. And you need that modern plumbing, Wayland, to run Waydroid effectively. Waydroid is basically a way to run Android apps inside a container.
Ah, gotcha. And Waydroid is better than, say, Anbox.
Well, Anbox development has kind of stalled. Waydroid's where the action is now, generally seen as more promising.
But the report also flags some issues, right? Like,
Yeah.
It's not perfectly smooth sailing with Waydroid on Kubuntu yet.
Exactly. Potential for crashes, maybe some setup headaches. It can work well, sometimes even faster than emulators. But yeah, it might take some tinkering. And your hardware, especially if you have an NVIDIA graphics card, can complicate things a bit. Still evolving, let's say.
Okay, that makes sense. What about the basics? Stability, updates, how does Kubuntu handle that? It follows the main Ubuntu cycle.
Yep, pretty much. New version every 6 months. But the key thing for most users, especially new ones, is the LTS long-term support.
Right, long-term support.
Those come out every 2 years in April.
Yeah.
So Kubuntu 24.04 LTS, the current one, gets support until April 2027. That's 3 years.
3 years. And the non-LTS ones?
They only get 9 months of support. So the report strongly suggests, and I'd agree, stick to the LTS releases for stability.
Just use the standard update manager, like Discover or the command line.
Exactly. Avoid the temptation to add unofficial backports for newer software unless you really know what you're doing, because that can introduce instability.
Good advice. And if you do hit a snag, what's the support situation like? Community, documentation.
That's actually a real strength for Kubuntu. The community is pretty big and welcoming.
Where do you find them?
Forums, Kubuntu Forums as Kubuntu, which covers all Ubuntu flavors, live chat on Matrix or Telegram, mailing lists, lots of places.
And docs.
Yep, official Kubuntu manuals and guides, plus you benefit from all the general Ubuntu documentation and the massive amount of info out there on the KDE Plasma desktop itself. So you're well covered.
Okay, nearly wrapping up. The report touched on alternatives briefly. Any other Ubuntu flavors that Windows switchers might want to consider?
Yeah, it's specifically called out Linux Mint, particularly the Cinnamon desktop version.
Why Mint Cinnamon?
It's very focused on looking and feeling like Windows, maybe even more so out of the box than Ubuntu. Plus, its LTS versions have 5 years of support, which is longer.
Ah, okay. 5 years is significant.
Definitely. So Mint Cinnamon is a really strong alternative if that immediate deep Windows familiarity and longer support are top priorities. Of course, there's regular Ubuntu with GNOME, Xubuntu with XFCE, but Mint is often highlighted for switchers.
Right. So let's recap this deep dive based on the report. Kubuntu looks like a really solid option for Windows users.
Yeah. Familiar interface with KDE Plasma, tons of customization potential.
Strong community, decent stability with the LTS releases.
Exactly. The Android app situation via Waydroid, it's, promising, but maybe not quite a slam dunk for everyone just yet. Requires a bit of patience, perhaps.
So for you listening, hopefully that clears things up a bit as you weigh your options moving from Windows. Kubuntu offers a lot, but maybe check out Mint Cinnamon too.
Good summary. It's about finding the right balance for you.
Which leads to a final thought. We talk about familiarity, making a new OS feel like home. But what does that really mean when you're embracing something fundamentally different, something to ponder? Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.